Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural meeting of the USDA Equity Commission. My name is Cecilia Hernandez, and I serve as a federal designated officer. With that, the meeting will now come to order. A few ground rules for today's meeting. Panelists, please use the hand raise function if you have a question. Members of the staff will be monitoring the chat for any questions. And lastly, please put yourselves on mute when not speaking. With that, it is my great honor to introduce to you Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack.
Cecilia, thank you very, very much. And to all, a good day. Let me start by beginning to thank everyone who is serving on the commission and on the subcommittee on agriculture. Realizing how busy you all are, this is a very significant undertaking for the department, and we know that you are committed to it and that you will be spending a good deal of your time. So first and foremost, you need to understand how appreciative we are at USDA for you taking the time and the interest in serving in this incredibly important and I think historic effort at USDA. Let me also take this opportunity to thank Deputy Bernal and Arturo Rodriguez for assuming the responsibility of co-chairing this Equity Commission. Again, I know these two individuals are deeply committed to equity, and I know that they look forward to working with you collaboratively to develop a set of recommendations for our department. I'd also like to recognize and thank Dr. Goldman, who is my senior advisor on equity, who has been engaged and involved in helping to establish the Equity Commission and also the work that we are currently doing in the Department on Equity. Cecilia, I want to thank you for your willingness to serve in this capacity and for the staff who has spent a lot of time already preparing for these meetings and preparing for the work of the commission. Let me emphasize how important this is. This is a circumstance and a situation where the Department of Agriculture has for a number of years has had a history and a history that we're not particularly proud of, where individuals working for the Department of Agriculture have intentionally or unintentionally discriminated against a number of folks across America for an extended period of time. This commission, however, is a little different than what we've had before. In the past, we've been involved and engaged in trying to right the wrongs of the past. I think of my previous work as secretary, where we were engaged and involved in settling a variety of claims and litigations that had been brought by the department by those who had been discriminated against over the years. The Pigford case, the Keepsigle case, the Garcia cases, the Love cases. These were cases that involved African-American producers, Native American producers, women, Hispanic producers who felt that they had been discriminated against by the Department of Agriculture in terms of being able to establish the kind of financing and support for their farming operations. I know that during the course of my time as secretary before, we spent a great deal of time trying to resolve these claims. There were roughly somewhere between 20 and 25,000 claims that had been assessed against the department. Some of them were class actions, some of them were not class actions. And we went through a very extensive process to try to provide literally billions of dollars of payments to producers in order to compensate in part for the discriminatory acts of the past. That was a backward-looking process in which we were attempting to do some degree of right by those who had been wrong. This effort is a little bit different. This effort is designed at trying to find out and understanding how our processes work or do not work today to advance equity, how they work or do not work to provide access to the important programs that USDA provides, whether or not there is still a discrimination taking place at the department, intentional or unintentional, and whether there are a lack of resources, a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding about our programs, all of which create a circumstance and situation where the department is not acting as equitably as it needs to provide the level of service and help that I think is important for people who live, work, and raise their families in rural places and across the U.S. So it's a forward-looking process in the sense that it's designed to create a set of recommendations so that we actually become a more equitable department. This is not really designed at this point to compensate people for discrimination that may have taken place. There's other processes in the works in terms of the backward-looking effort. What I hope we get from this commission is a set of recommendations for how the USDA can be a place of equity, how it can be a place of inclusion, how it can be a place of making services and programs available to all who qualify, regardless of race or gender, national origin, sexual orientation, or geography. This is really, really important. Now, the history of what has taken place in this department is important as it provides an opportunity to know where to look, where to examine, where to evaluate. So we're not righting the wrongs of the past. We are simply trying to prevent wrongs in the future with this effort. The charge here is to make a set of recommendations. You may recommend improvements. You may recommend modifications. You may recommend transformational change to the way in which we do business. You might suggest regulatory changes. You might suggest the need for statutory changes. You might suggest the need for executive action. My commitment and the deputy's commitment and the staff's commitment at USDA is to take your recommendations, regardless of whether they're regulatory, statutory, budget, or executive decision-making. We will take those recommendations seriously, and we are committed to doing everything we can to follow through on the recommendations that you intend to make so that we become that more equitable department. I'm hopeful that you also spend some time thinking about how you can hold us accountable to the recommendations that you in fact make. This accountability is an important issue because we have to integrate into the DNA, into the fabric, into the thought process and the philosophy of this department, equity. It's not something that necessarily naturally comes throughout the nearly 100,000 people that work at USDA. How can we hold ourselves accountable so that this exercise is not the exercise of a single administration, but is the exercise of a department committed to equity now and in the future? I suspect that you'll take a look at a variety of aspects of our operation, but you'll also learn about steps that are already being taken at USDA. You may find them acceptable. You may find them to be on the right track. You may find that we need to do more or less of something. We're anxious to hear from you. We are in the process now of hiring a lot of people at USDA, and we're doing it with an equity and diversity mindset. We're looking for ways in which we can attract talented help to the USDA across the board. We know from a review of our current workforce that there is a need, for example, for us to recruit more Asian Americans and more Hispanic and Latino Americans. We know that we have a significant number of African Americans working for USDA, but they're not necessarily geographically distributed in a way that would provide the kind of level of help to folks who live, work, and raise their families in communities across the United States. So we have issues with reference to hiring, not only in terms of numbers, but also in terms of placement. We know that we have a relationship today with minority serving institutions, historic Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, Native American tribal colleges. But we know we need to do more in order for the efforts with those partnerships and relationships to be equitable, especially in relationship to our relationship with traditional land-grant universities. You'll learn during the course of your work here that we are in an effort underway to try to provide some degree of debt reduction or relief to farmers who have done business with USDA. The American Rescue Plan contained a section 1005, you'll hear a lot about this, in which Congress directed us to begin a process of providing debt relief to those who have been historically underserved, who are currently indebted to the USDA. We began that effort with a series of letters sent out to borrowers to advise them of the need for us to work with them to collaborate the level of their debt and to make sure that we were calculating the level of not only debt forgiveness, but also financial assistance to pay for taxes resulting from debt forgiveness. As we sent those letters out and as we began the process of providing debt relief, a number of lawsuits were filed by a variety of folks across the country, 13 lawsuits in total. And within those lawsuits, we were enjoined by court order from taking any further action in terms of debt relief. We are contesting those cases. We are working through the system, and eventually, probably in the near future, we may very well be faced with one or more of those cases being decided. We will obviously do what we can to make sure that we pursue this debt relief opportunity. We continue to work with our friends in Congress as well. The Build Back Better proposal that President Biden proposed, but has not yet passed, also contained provisions for debt relief. So that's an aspect of work that's ongoing that we will continue to focus on, but you need to be aware of. You also need to be aware of the fact that under the American Rescue Plan, under Section 1006, there is additional resources provided to the department to provide expanded technical assistance to historically underserved producers. We know that not all the information we need to get to folks about programs is getting to them. And sometimes when it does get to them, it's pretty complex and it's difficult for individuals and for groups of individuals to be able to access our programs. Sometimes the system, the process can be cumbersome. You may take a look at that. In the meantime, we have recently awarded $75 million to 20 different organizations and groups across the United States that have a trusted relationship with a variety of groups that we're trying to make sure we're reaching out to. We're going to expand on that number in the very near future with an additional set of resources for smaller organizations and groups that will do as well, reaching out to groups that have been historically underserved to provide technical assistance, awareness of our programs, and assistance in terms of being able to qualify and apply for our programs. In addition, money was also directed in this effort for us to do an evaluation of how well or not we provide market access. How can we help and assist historically underserved producers, not only to provide access to credit, but also to provide access to existing markets opportunities. Now, we've started that process a bit through our procurement at USDA. We purchase a lot of food. We purchase it for food banks. We purchase it for school nutrition programs. In the past, those purchase contracts have gone primarily to large national distribution efforts. We've now directed roughly $600 million of our recent purchasing to be connected to local and regional distributors and historically underserved producers to begin creating a network, a supply chain, a system and a framework for ensuring that we're connecting historically underserved producers to market opportunities. In addition, Section 1006 also directs us to look at the issue of land access. Now, as a result of the cumulative impact and effect of discrimination over time, a lot of farmers of color, minority farmers, have not been able to expand their operations as successfully as their white counterparts have. And that's part of the reason, in part, is because it's difficult for some of these farmers to be able to show clear title to the land which they own as a result of ways in which land was conveyed without wills, without deeds at times. There is a fractional interest in ownership. This is true of African American farmers. It's certainly true of Hispanic farmers and also true of Native American farmers. We have just recently established a rule called the Heirs Property Rule and a program designed to provide resources to allow folks to consolidate ownership of land so that they're in a position now to qualify for USDA programs. But there is much, much more to be done in terms of trying to provide appropriate land access to those who have been historically underserved. So that's part of the work that we're doing. We're also engaged and involved. Later today, I'll have a meeting with commodity groups. We have systems in place at USDA where we have a series of boards and commissions that provide advice and direction to the department in terms of policy. Now, those boards and commissions are made up of producers from the various commodities that are produced throughout U.S. agriculture. We have a dairy board, we've got a soy board, we've got a lamb board, we've got across a multitude of these boards and commissions. Appointments are made based on recommendations that are made to the secretary. I'm going to have a meeting today of major commodity groups in which I'm going to encourage them to do a better job of encouraging greater diversity in the appointments that they recommend to me. Far too often we see a slate of appointees that is essentially white male. And it's important and necessary for boards and commissions and for the work of USDA that we have more diversity in those boards and commissions. So that work is ongoing. We also have work that's ongoing here at USDA to better train those of us who do work here at USDA. For example, our Civil Rights Office is going to conduct a series of trainings based on intentional and unintentional bias so that we all understand how our brains work and how that can oftentimes create an unintended bias that results in someone not getting equitable treatment. I just review briefly those steps because you need to understand that there is work ongoing at USDA in this space of equity. Now, you know that there is a subcommittee on agriculture. You may ask the question, well, why isn't there a subcommittee on other areas of USDA? Well, there will be. We felt that it was important to start in the place where there has been the greatest attention to the discriminatory activities in the past. So that we start with agriculture, we start with that customer-facing organization and entity so that we can potentially get recommendations from all of you as quickly as possible so that we can begin the process of evaluating how best to pursue the implementation of those recommendations. That doesn't mean that that's all we're doing here. We intend and expect that we're going to see other subcommittees appointed over the course of time that will eventually get the broad scope of USDA activities. As you will learn, the Department of Agriculture has an enormous reach, has 17 different mission areas, and all of them, I think, need at some point in time to have this analysis and evaluation conducted. But we felt it was important and necessary, especially since Congress directed us to create this equity commission with a focus on race, and I think with an idea of focusing first and foremost on producers, that we start with an agriculture subcommittee. This can be an overwhelming task, given the breadth of USDA, given the history of USDA, and given the enormity of the challenge of figuring out how best to craft and structure programs, policies, procedures, et cetera, at USDA. That's why I think it's important for us to begin, if you will, with a segment of USDA so that we don't overwhelm all of you and overwhelm all of us with the magnitude of the job that's required. Let me conclude and be happy to respond to any questions that folks may have by simply saying it's just really, really important for us to know how to identify those places where we can make the most impact in terms of equity and how we can basically create and institute them in a way that they are permanent. That this is not a circumstance and situation that it depends on which administration or who the secretary is or who the deputy is or who the undersecretary is at any point in time. We're truly interested in recommendations that will allow permanent change and transformation in this particular area. And so we look forward to working with you, look forward to informing you, providing you the resources and the information. You will already see, I suspect, from the packet of information that you either have or will be getting, that there's been a lot of work done in various aspects of this issue of equity, but nothing akin to what you all are about ready to undertake. So let me end by where I began with a big thank you. This is some of the most important work that will be undertaken by USDA over the course of the next several years. We are committed to it. We are certainly appreciative of the serious thinkers that are on this commission and on the subcommittee, and we look forward to the recommendations that you will make over the course of time. So with that, Cecilia, if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them. And if not, I'll let the deputy and Arturo take over.
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack, for your time, for your commitment to this commission. We are going to move on to provide an opportunity for the co-chairs to introduce themselves. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And with
Good
that,
morning.
yes, go ahead, Deputy.
Good morning. Thank you, Cecilia. Good morning, everyone. Secretary Vilsack, thank you for your comments and thank you for your leadership. To the members of the Equity Commission and to the Subcommittee on Agriculture members, thank you for being here today and for this commitment. We have a lot of work to do and we've got some serious work to do. And I just want to start by saying I am honored and humbled to serve as co-chair of the commission alongside my co-chair, Mr. Arturo Rodriguez. And today is an important day for many people for many reasons. You know, as Deputy Secretary, I just want to say I am committed to this work. I have said many times, and I will say again, this work is amongst the most important that I think I will do at USDA. This commission has a lot to do and is committed to tackling head-on the past discriminations and current policies that we all know continue to this day. My sincere hope is that together, we can make recommendations, as the Secretary said, that are real, that are lasting, and that result in lasting change. I encourage you all, as members of the committees, to bring everything to the table. Your expertise, your experience, your backgrounds, your ideas, your full selves, bring all of it. USDA needs it, our customers need it, and we all need it. You know, the Equity Commission is forward thinking. Secretary Vilsack mentioned efforts to really focus on past discriminations. We continue to focus on the past, but this commission and the subcommittee are charged to move forward. We're looking to address systemic racism and program inequities from a broad scale. But that being said, we do understand that there are people who have personal grievances, have frustrations and complaints, and we have a process for capturing those as well. So if there's anyone who has a personal grievance or personal complaint that they would like to share, please reach out to Cinnamon Butler. She is the branch chief of the Office of Civil Rights. Again, Cinnamon Butler, the branch chief of the Office of Civil Rights, for anyone who has a personal grievance or complaint to file. Now, I would like to say this: public participation is extremely important today. We encourage the public to engage with us as well. We will not be successful without the engagement of the public. We've received a number of written comments, and we'll be hearing from some members of the public a little bit later today. Just know that all comments will be reviewed and considered by the commission and included as a part of the meeting record. Again, we're committed to this process, and we will be talking more about opportunities for the public to engage later today. And now I have the honor of introducing my co-chair to say a few words. Mr. Rodriguez is the President Emeritus of the United Farmer Workers, and he has dedicated his career to the lives of farm workers. He's been selfless. I feel very, very honored to serve alongside my co-chair, as I know that he is fully committed and he has led change, a lot of change in the past. And so, you know, we're very privileged to work to lead this Equity Commission. So I would like to give you an opportunity, Mr. Rodriguez, to share a few comments, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. Madam Secretary, it is an honor and a pleasure also as well. I mean, you have tremendous experience and commitment to this, as well as Secretary Vilsack. And I think that's one of the things that I'm so excited about, the fact that working with people that are committed and determined to make a difference, as well as all of you that are part of this, the commission, the subcommittee, to be able to work with y'all. There's several reasons why I feel like we can really do something very worthwhile here. First of all, Secretary Vilsack, I mean, we heard his comments. I've known him for many, many years now, that he is a man of integrity, and someone that really does want to see a change, real change come about as a result of his work and our work. In addition, obviously, the wide range of folks that we have, the diversity we have on this, both the commission as well as the committee, the Agriculture Committee, I think we're all very well informed and very active within this agricultural industry, within the issues around equity. And I think, again, we will all be able to contribute to making a difference here. And then we have an administration that I believe is anxiously awaiting whatever recommendations we come up with and ready to act on them and to move this forward. Excuse me. We are in 2022, as we all know, the 21st century, and it's our responsibility to give direction on how to overcome the barriers that have existed for too long against minority farmers and others within the agricultural industry, and in particular with farm workers as well, and to ensure that they have access and the same ability to utilize these services as anyone else. I'm very much interested in see what advances we can make. Secretary Vilsack was actually the first U.S. secretary to ever invite our organization, farm workers, to actually come to the building and to the offices of the United States Department of Agriculture and to begin to work with us during his initial administration there with President Barack Obama. So it's a real pleasure to be with him again and to have this opportunity to work with all of you. In particular, I'm very much interested in seeing what role this commission can play to help and to foster and to ensure that immigration reform takes place for farm workers in our country. As I mentioned in our opening session when we got together, you know, over 50% of the farm labor force, according to the US government, is undocumented, which basically means that over 50%, and I personally believe it's much higher than that, do not have access to the kinds of services and programs and so forth that the United States Department of Agriculture offers. So I know that we've worked closely with Secretary Vilsack over the years in terms of trying to bring that about. And we look forward to working with this commission to be able to have that as well. I'm very confident that by working together, we can find solutions to all of the issues that each of us champion and create a 21st century USDA. This is our moment in history to really make a difference. And I'm looking forward to doing it with each and every one of you. Thank you, Madam Secretary, Deputy Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary and Co-Chair Rodriguez. With that, it is now my pleasure to introduce to you the members of the Equity Commission, followed by the Agriculture Subcommittee. As a reminder, we have 25 minutes for introductions, so members provide your name and organization. And with that, I am going to start with Member Reed.
Good morning, Hazel Reed, National Black Growers Council.
Thank you, Member Reed. Member Stanger McCollin.
Phil Haas, Isquinchuten, Sutitsqua. Hello, my name is Water Runs Downhill, and my English name is Tony Stanger McLaughlin, and I'm representing the Native American Agriculture Fund.
Thank you. Member Johnson. Member Johnson. Member Rainey.
Good morning, Ron Rainey, here representing University of Arkansas System Division of Agriculture.
Thank you. Member Loza.
Hi, Mireya Loza. I am the historian on the committee, and I am a historian at Georgetown University and a curator at the National Museum of American History.
Thank you. Member Rawls.
Yes, hello and good morning, everyone. I'm Charlie Rawls, and I'm an independent appointee on the commission. Thank you.
Member Amons.
Morning, everyone. My name is Charlotte Ammons. I'm with the Center for Environmental Farming Systems at North Carolina State University in partnership with North Carolina A&T State University.
Thank you. Member Cias Hernandez.
Afternoon, everyone. Poppy Cias Hernandez coming to you from the great state of Michigan. I am the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer for our state, and I am serving in the role of change management and systems change expert.
Thank you. Member Corley.
Good morning, everyone. Todd Corley, representing Carhartt, where I lead their effort in Office of Inclusion, Sustainability, and Community. And I'm looking forward to the interaction with the members and the public.
Thank you. Member Lee.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Yvonne Lee from California, and I'm a public policy advocate with a special focus in advancing social justice and ethics.
Thank you. Member Lower Bash.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth Lauer Bash. I am employed by the Center for Law and Social Policy, a national anti-poverty organization, and I bring policy expertise.
Thank you. Member Sherrod.
Good morning. I'm Shirley Sherrod, and I'm with the Southwest Georgia Project for Community Education located in Albany, Georgia.
Thank you. And Member Smith. Okay, well, we will now move on to the members of the Agriculture Subcommittee. Member Rage Fiddler.
Good morning, I'm Sherry Rogie Fiddler. I'm a farmer from Nebraska and also CEO of Farm Foundation, which is a nearly 90-year-old think tank, do tank. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Member Horn. Member Horn.
Sorry, my system is frozen. Or Savvy Horn with the North Carolina Association of Black Lawyers Land Loss Prevention Project, a civil rights organization. I'm the executive director. I am just looking forward to the work of the Ag Committee and the kind of systemic change that we have envisioned for years. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Rosales.
Yes, hi, this is Alex Rosales. I'm from the state of Texas. I'm with the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, where I co-direct the Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Eubanks.
Good morning. I'm Gina Eubanks from the state of Louisiana, representing Louisiana Cooperative Extension Program, which is inclusive of both LSU and Southern University.
Thank you. Member Hughes.
Good afternoon, Michelle Hughes. I'm a community-based organization representative representing the National Young Farmers Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lawrence.
Good morning. Carrie Jo Lawrence. I'm with the Intertribal Agriculture Council.
Thank you. Member Haney.
Good morning. My name is PJ Haney. I'm a farmer from Virginia, and I'm representing the National Black Growers Council.
Thank you. Member Redding.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm honored to serve with you in the Ag Subcommittee, and thank you, Secretary Vilsack and team, for your confidence in our work here. I'm Russell Redding, Secretary of Agriculture in Pennsylvania. My wife and I farm in Gettysburg, and for 40 years have been involved in production agriculture from dairy to crops, and worked on Capitol Hill, been fortunate to be a dean. But most importantly, my role in public service and the intersect between the public policy work of food and agriculture with our larger communities here in PA, and being that bridge between the food system and our producers and consumers. So thank you.
Thank you. Member Hung.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jansen Hang. I'm a farmer and also the executive director of the Hmong American Farmer Association in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Thank you. Member Lomeli Corcoran.
Hi, good morning. Erica Lomeli Corcoran from California, representing farm workers, Latinos, and immigrant communities with the UFW Foundation.
Thank you. Member Vogel.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Vogel.
I'm from North Dakota. I'm an attorney and an author, and I was one of the attorneys on the Keeps Eagle case. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you, and to work with all of you.
Thank you. Member Madison.
I am Gary Madison. I work for the Farm Credit Council as Senior Vice President, Beginning Farmer Programs and Outreach.
Thank you. Member Stevens.
Good morning. I am Jenny Stevens, and I am the Chief Executive Officer at the Center for Heirs Property Preservation in Charleston, South Carolina.
Thank you. And now we're going to go back to the Equity Commission to introduce Member Smith.
Sorry about that. Very embarrassing. I'm Rick Smith, President and CEO of a large dairy farmer-owned cooperative, Dairy Farmers of America, comprised mostly of smaller dairy farmers across the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. And Member Cousin.
Good morning. I too apologize for my tardy arrival this morning. Want to thank Secretary Vilsack and the USDA for allowing me to participate in this commission. I am the CEO of an impact investment firm working to ensure access to capital for underserved entrepreneurs, particularly Black and Brown entrepreneurs across the food system. I'm formerly the U.S. Ambassador for Food and Agriculture and the former Executive Director of the World Food Program, and working to ensure that we have an ecosystem that ensures access to capital, capacity, and support for underserved communities, farmers, and consumers. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I want to thank all of the members. We really are grateful for your service, and we look forward to working with you. We are going to do a quick 3-minute stretch, use the restroom, grab some coffee, some water, and we'll be back at 12:12. Okay. It is 12:12 Eastern Standard Time. And so with that, we are going to get started. And members of the team, if you can bring up the slide on the summary of orientation, please. Okay, well, let's get started. A reminder, a few weeks ago, the Equity Commission and the Agriculture Subcommittee attended orientation and training. They were provided an overview of the role of the Federal Advisory Board Act guidelines, rules, and expectations. They also attended the required ethics training and filed all applicable paperwork. As a reminder, members have been selected to serve a 2-year appointment. At that time, the secretary will decide on the future of the commission and subcommittee. We are now going to spend some time going over roles and responsibilities and background definitions, legislations, a review on and validation on the scope, goals, and roles, and then we will open it up to a Q&A among members. And so with that, I will go ahead and spend a few minutes just talking to you all about roles and responsibilities. So as a DFO, my role is to ensure compliance with FACA and any other applicable laws and regulations. I will call, attend, join committee meetings. I will approve agendas, maintain required records, ensure our operations are going as efficient as possible, and maintain records and make those available to the public. The roles of the co-chairs, they will understand and the FACA and ethics requirements and any other bylaws or key issues. They will know the agenda and the agenda needs. They will help identify fact-finding needs. They will document the committee's advice. They will promote contribution from each member, and they will collaborate with me if there are any issues or problems. The role of the committee members is really to have an active role in the development of recommendations. They are also publicly known as being qualified and eligible to serve on the committee and subcommittee, and only the committee participates in the development of those recommendations. And now it is my honor to introduce to you the Deputy Secretary. She will be providing a background on the Equity Commission and a little bit of the history.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Looking at our background, what brings us here today is a history of discrimination, and that history of discrimination has impacted a lot of folks for much of the history of the Department of Agriculture. And a lot of the discrimination is well documented. Some of it is not documented, but we know that it exists. We also know that it runs very deep, and it's a hard truth that we have to acknowledge, and we fully acknowledge that. What do we do now? How do we move forward? Where do we go from here? That is exactly why we're here today, is to outline a path of how we are to move forward. So let's look at some definitions in the next slide. We have the definitions of equity, racial equity, and we'll also talk about systemic equity. And if you look at that definition of equity, consistent and systemic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment. I look at this equity definition as the goal. That is where we desire to be. As we think about our history, just announcing that we're going to move forward in an equitable way, we realize it's not enough. We realize that there is more that needs to be done to get us to that place of equity. And that's what this Equity Commission and the subcommittees are all about, is helping us reach that place of equity. But as we move forward with the work of this Equity Commission, we're going to dig deeper into racial equity and broader issues of systemic equity. So just so we can be clear, racial equity, what does that include? It includes communities such as Black, Latino, Indigenous, and Native American persons, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders, Alaska Natives, and other persons of color. Realizing that the focus on racial equity is very important, we also know that in terms of equity, there are broader equity issues that we really need to dig deeper into as part of the Equity Commission. So we will also address systemic equity. So that includes other underserved communities, such as members of religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer plus community members, persons with disabilities, people who live in rural areas, people who are otherwise or adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality, or are proactively and consistently not included. Also, we will focus on our veteran communities. So we're looking at racial equity and broader equity, systemic equity issues as part of the work that we have to do. Next slide, please. In terms of our legislation and our authority, to give us a bit more of a context as to why we are here, the next two slides go over the legislation and the authority that we have been designated through Congress and through the president's charge to us. The president charged this commission with this work through his executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government, and Congress has also charged this commission with the work by authorizing this commission as part of the American Rescue Plan. Next slide, please. Additional legislation and authority is governed by what we call the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA. This allows for transparency to the public, for the public to attend all meetings, to provide comments, either written or oral, and to access reports, transcripts, and materials. As I said in my earlier comments, we welcome members of the public who are here today, and we will be hearing from some of you all shortly. You are certainly a key part to our success and to the process that we are going through. We look forward to hearing from you through your written and oral comments throughout the process. I will now hand it over to Co-Chair Rodriguez, who will walk us through the purpose and the goals of the commission.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary. So up to this point, we've been talking about the commission and the agricultural subcommittee. It is important to distinguish, however, the purpose, goals, expectations of each of us. We'll start with the commission, and later today, we'll talk more in more detail about the agricultural subcommittee. So the purpose, first of all, is to provide recommendations to the Secretary on policies, programs, and actions needed to address racial equity issues within the Department of Agriculture and its programs, including strengthening accountability at USDA, and to provide recommendations to the Secretary on broader and more systemic equity issues at USDA. Secretary Vilsack talked a lot about this in his presentation earlier this morning. And so it's very clear in terms of the work that we have to do and what the focus of this commission is. The goals focus on a number of different areas. One is to identify and recommend actions to remove barriers to equitable access and use of USDA programs, policies, systems, structures, and practices, including impediments that are internal, external, discretionary, or statutory. To also recommend actions and solutions that address racial equity issues, expand assistance, and provide support for historically underserved customers and communities needed for equitable access to USDA programs and services. Thirdly, is to recommend actions and solutions that address broader and more systemic equity issues at USDA. And finally, is to recommend actions that will ensure USDA is a modern, competitive workplace within an organizational culture that prioritizes diversity, equity, inclusion, and access for its staff and customers alike. Looking next, we want to review the roles and responsibilities that we have here on the Equity Commission. First, it's to charge and oversee a series of subcommittees to achieve the goals, with the first being the Agricultural Subcommittee. Secondly, we want to establish a subcommittee on rural community and economic development at a later date to provide recommendations on issues and concerns related to rural development, economic health, and well-being. In addition, we want to take the recommendations from the Agricultural Subcommittee and subsequent subcommittees, provide a final report to the Secretary with prioritized set of short-term and long-term recommendations for how action can be taken to reduce barriers to access and advance equity for underserved producers and communities. The timeline and deliverables at this point, based on what we know, the first Equity Commission members are appointed for 2 years, as previously mentioned, and will provide deliverables according to the following timelines. In February of 2022, launch of the Equity Commission and Ag Subcommittee, which we're doing right now. September of 2022, the first interim report from the Agricultural Subcommittee. By November 2022, we want to have the interim report for the Rural Community and Economic Development Subcommittee. Next year, February 2023, the final report from the Agricultural Subcommittee, and May 2023, the final report from Subcommittee for the Rural CED. And then by the summer of 2023, we want to have the consolidated final report from the Equity Commission itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair Rodriguez and Deputy Secretary. Now I would like to open it up for a Q&A session among the co-chairs and members of the commission and subcommittee. We want to hear from you members. What resonates? What how can USDA help? What tools do you need? So I'm going to open up the floor. Please provide thoughts, ideas, concerns. The floor is yours. Yes, member Cias.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to our co-chairs. My question would be, what is the plan for integrating both the public comments, written and spoken, the deliberations that happen with the subcommittee, and then the broader commission? And I'm just sort of thinking about, I read through the many pages of comments that were submitted, and I kind of want to feel confident that those comments are sort of being looked at through a similar lens from the commission perspective and the subcommittee perspective. I hope that's clear.
Yes, it's clear, and I can respond, but Deputy and Mr. Rodriguez, feel free to chime in. Yes, we are going to have a process of providing all of the members the written comments, and we are giving the members of the public to provide additional written comments a few days out, even after today's meeting, until March 15th. And so what we will do at USDA is we will package it all together and provide it to you. And we really hope that as you are coming up with your recommendations, coming up with a list, that you have all of that information from the public. And it will be, and it's, as a DFO, I will ensure that all of the members have it, regardless if it's geared to the subcommittee or to the commission. It will be provided to all members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia, and I appreciate the question. We just want to reiterate how important public comment is. We need that feedback. We need the engagement with the public. And so please know it is very much a priority for us to get all of that information to you, to get it in front of you so that you are fully aware, and the public also knows that they've been heard, and we're very transparent about that. Thank you.
Member Ronald Rainey.
Thank you. One of the documents we received was the Jackson Lewis report of the Civil Rights Assessment. And the Secretary had mentioned earlier about accountability being very important to this process. Is there a report of the actions taken or not taken, or reasons why they were not taken from those recommendations from that assessment?
Member Rainey, thank you for that question. And please allow us to get some specific follow-up. We will follow up on the actions thereafter, and we will make sure that we get an answer to you all, to your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Yvonne Lee.
Thank you, and thank you, co-chairs, for the presentation. I just have a couple of comments. Number one, for the coverage groups that you have mentioned, I would like to suggest that you include immigration status in part of the cover groups, because as co-chair Rodriguez mentioned, over half of our stakeholders have different immigration status, and many of the immigrant farmers have entered into the ag business. So I think that it would be great and necessary for us to include this group as part of our discussion for equity. The second question I have is following up on earlier questions on public engagement. There may be emerging communities who may not be connected to the USDA's services and probably the creation of this commission. What can we do as commission members to really help bring in those voices as we move forward toward the interim report later in this year? Thank you.
Yes, I can help answer that, Member Lee. One of the things is I would provide them with, this is very high level, but with our website, but most importantly with our email, equitycommission@usda.gov, and we will make sure that all of the members and of the commission and subcommittee get this. But also, more importantly, I think as we move through and we have additional public meetings, this is an opportunity for them to come in and speak to you and share your concerns. Share their concerns publicly. So there will be multiple opportunities. They can send us information via email, or we can engage them throughout the process.
If I could ask a follow-up for the agency websites, it would be great if we can have language access for the public as well, other than English.
What language are you, do you have one language in mind?
I think for the, I can submit that to you. I would like to recommend top 3 Asian languages that you can consider. Thank you.
Member Lee, thank you for that question. And, I think what is really so important about the work that we're going to do going forward is there's some things that we know. Member Rainey raised the point about previous reports that we've done. There's some things that we know. There are groups that we've worked with in the past that we know that we have to really think about how we're going to move forward in an equitable way with those groups. But there are other groups that we're not aware of, other parts of USDA that we want to make sure that we become aware of in terms of our policies, programs, or missed audiences. And so that's where we encourage you as members to think about who have we not engaged with that we should be engaging with, as Member Lee raised. How can we reach those audiences? That's really important. So in addition to the engagement with the public, I ask you all to think about who are those audiences that we have not included historically that we need to do extra outreach to going forward.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Member Tony Stanger. I think you're on mute. There you go.
Hi, I just wanted to talk about some protocol. what is the authority of the members to request information from various offices within USDA? I know that there was funding that was provided to supply us with staffing. For instance, there was a question in the chat box earlier discussing tax payment, and I assume that's a person who was a former class member. If we could ask the Civil Rights Office if they had any complaints, or we need to do any follow-up to make sure that those payments were processed adequately, and if that is an issue that should be addressed. So just wondering about how the committee could go about finding that information as these questions are coming in and the concerns are coming in. They're going to look to us as commission members to be able to solve these problems. And in order to do that, we need to communicate with the department.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And yes, so as we go through developing the recommendations, whatever information, whatever contact office you need, you will work through me, and I will be that one person, your one-stop shop, so that we are working with the offices and are being responsive to our stakeholder input and questions and concerns. Member Cousin.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the co-chairs for that very comprehensive report on how this commission will work. One question that came to mind as I listened to the statement of when the reports will be made and the dates for when the recommendations from this commission are expected to come forth, the concern or question that came to my mind was during this period of time that we are working, and prior to the time that we make our recommendations, there will be action regarding the next farm bill, as well as there's ongoing action regarding the US's commitment to supporting the UN Food System Summit and the commitments that were made by the US government, including USDA, to certain actions and activities. Those actions and activities, as well as the Farm Bill, will be should be, I should say, affected by the recommendations of this commission. So the question is, what is the opportunity for interim recommendations from the commission for us to ensure that we have appropriate input into ongoing activities of the government? Thank you.
Member Cousin, you asked an excellent question. We understand that time is of the essence. And so in terms of preparations for the next Farm Bill, one, we're really trying to work hard to time that interim report so that we can be able to think about what we formally can move forward with ahead of the Farm Bill. With that being said, there is nothing that prevents us where there are actions that we can implement immediately. We can move forward with recommendations where appropriate, where we have the authority. There's nothing that prevents us from taking those into consideration and moving forward with making those changes immediately. It just depends on the type of recommendation that the committee comes forward with and what is the authority that we have to make an immediate change. But yes, we can move forward with immediate action from the committee.
Member Lomeli.
Yes, good afternoon. So I really appreciate the Deputy Secretary, and something that resonated is just, the focus on definitions about equity and, and bringing just discrimination, even using those words, right? So for the work that I've done over the last 15 years is that for years, USDA, I feel has, failed to treat farm workers as constituents to be respected, heard, and served. Indeed, as we look at the website and the language that is used, mission areas such as the farm production and conservation focuses on its premises for the nation, farmers and ranchers and other stewards of private agricultural lands, but does not once mention the farm workers without whom those farms and ranches would be unable to function. And I do think that, this committee, USDA, has a responsibility to use its program resources and purchasing power in a way that improves the living and working conditions for farm workers, respects the human dignity of farm workers, and rewards those agriculture employers who treat their farm workers well. So in this process, and my question is that, I would like to learn more about the steps that the USDA and this commission will take toward farm worker equity, and to recognize that farm workers are also equal stakeholders to its programs and services. And I'm excited to work on this with all of you. And thank you again.
Thank you, Member Lomeli Corcoran. Thank you for the point that you raised, which has been noted, and also with our co-chair, who is very passionate about those issues as well. You can be sure that we will be accountable and taking a look into farm worker equity, and appreciate you raising that point.
Member Horn. We can come back to you, Member Horn. Oh, there.
Yes, sorry,
It's okay.
I'm embedded in a family emergency, so I have to go on and off. I just wanted to make the point, since Jackson Lewis report came up, that there was also an NGO report, of which the Rural Coalition and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, through series of community process, wrote that informed the Jackson Lewis report. So I think those need to be read together. I also feel that some of the benefit, if you will, that came out of the Jackson Lewis report was through the Farm Bill process, the creation of the position of Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, that made that a cabinet level with the Secretary's office. And I think that was important. And I know that it was somewhat, but it needed the right people in place for that. And that also out of the Jackson Lewis report was a program piloted by Assistant Secretary of Administration Pearlie Reed, and that was the Strike Force, which sought to bring together throughout the South all the agencies of the government, along with community-based and land grant institution around a table to problem solve and to get at crises of the small farm communities in those states. So I think those are some good initiatives. And so I wouldn't want people to feel that that there was no accomplishment from this very expensive report. There was some, but we need to figure out why many recommendations were never implemented. So we've got our job cut out for us. Thank you.
Well said, Member Horn. Well said. We have made some progress since that report. I think in 2011 was when that report came out, but more work to do. I appreciate you raising that.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Appreciate your comments as well.
Thank you, Member Philip Johnson.
Thank you. My question as a farmer is regarding the implementation of some of the suggestions that we make. You know, a lot of farmers work on a cyclical nature as far as planting, et cetera. And if we are able to make recommendations that will benefit producers, what is the actionable time frame that it will take for those recommendations to take effect?
Member Haney, good question. I think it depends on what that recommendation is. You know, we just have to take that recommendation by recommendation from the committee, and we will take it under consideration. Thank you for raising the issue that's so important about planting seasons, and you know, we want to do this in a way that allows farmers and ranchers to be successful. So again, we'll just have to deliberate about what the specific recommendation is, but just know the intention is where we have the authority to take action. The intention is to move forward as soon as possible.
Member Corley?
Just,
Thank you. I apologize. Yes.
No, I just
Chair
wanted
Rodriguez.
just to further emphasize, Member Johnson, that very much understand the cyclical nature of agriculture and impacts not only on the producers and so forth, that obviously impacts on farm workers as well. So we are very much concerned about whatever recommendations we see to get them implemented as quickly as possible. And certainly if you have recommendations that you feel are urgent and we could act on, the sooner that we can get those and begin to look at them, the better.
Thank you, Co-Chair Rodriguez. Member Corley?
Thank you. I was really impressed with the Secretary's opening remarks. It was very vulnerable, honest. And what I've heard from the comments today from the other members, Member Horn, Member Lee, Member Johnson, make me think of a question. And the question is, how will we approach transparency about what we're doing? It seems like there's been a lot of effort to do a lot of good work. There's certainly a lot of work that still needs to be done, from the voluminous amount of material that we all read this weekend. I guess if we could just speak to what we're going to do to make sure that people know what we're doing, that we are not just being held accountable, but they see it in real time, whether or not it's in different languages on the site, updates, whatever it may be, because the activity in the chat box suggests that people really are looking for not just the accountability, but just to know that we're actually doing the work, which is why I think we all signed up for this great opportunity and humbly honored to work and serve in this way.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Cecilia.
Yeah, thank you, Member Corley. Yes, and one of the things that I want to continue stressing out is the transparency of this commission. We are going to be having 4 public meetings this year, one of them which is today, but also we have to put a lot of our resources online. Any administrative meetings that we have to do offline, all of the reports, agendas, everything has to be online. And so we want to make this so whereas the public is engaged throughout the process, the public will not be surprised when we're coming up with recommendations. They will be a part of this process. We will provide them that opportunity when we're doing these public meetings, and afterwards we will make sure that that when we have the interim report, when we have final report, that is everything that is online on our Equity Commission website. Deputy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that was great. And Member Corley, we have to adhere to that FACA process. So that means we recognize that there will be lots of discussion taking place, but we won't make any formal recommendations or any decisions unless it is done in a formal public meeting where the public has the opportunity to see those decisions and have input in those decisions being made.
Thank you, Deputy. Member Ammons?
Thank you. As mentioned, I think by Member Horn and so many others, and that I'm noticing in the chat right much is referencing previous committees and lists of recommendations that have been put forth already. So first of all, I want to acknowledge the work that's already been done. And also, given, I think somebody referenced or got at this question a little bit earlier, is there a way to get updates on how those reports have moved, how those recommendations have moved, not just the reports themselves, but follow-up on those reports, updates on what's happened? And also, is there a specific process for, given that all these reports have already happened, is there a specific process for recommending some of those recommendations that have already been set forth, particularly if we see them consistently over and over in previous reports, to recommend them for an executive order of some sort? Is there a specific process just to kind of as you mentioned, Deputy Secretary, some of those things we can get done, pretty immediately if that's the recommendation of this body. So is there a specific process, and is the executive order the way to get some of those higher level recommendations to move forward more quickly?
I will answer at a high level, but I do want to make sure that that I go back with USDA and get you a correct and accurate response. But in the meantime, I think it would be very helpful, and it is going to be my job to make sure that we do an analysis on our end at USDA where all those recommendations stand, and there are other advisory so structures that are in place at USDA. So definitely we want to get those to all of the members so that they can so that you can get a sense of where we're at, and we will definitely try to see which recommendations have been implemented and which ones have not. But that's something that I can definitely do for you. Okay, and I know on the chat, Member Rawls, you had a question.
Yeah, I thank you, Cecilia. I kind of a comment, kind of a maybe a question going forward, but I wanted to say I really was very interested and pleased to hear the Secretary talk about some of the things that are going on right now. Sounded very positive to me, particularly the 75 million to I think he said the way he termed it, trusted partners. And I assume that is probably what I remember is the 2501 partners, and maybe that's been expanded, and maybe somebody can fill me in a little bit on that. But I'm thinking going forward, the commission would benefit from staying closely connected to information about how that is working as those groups are brought in and the kind of work that they're doing, because I don't know if it's proper to call it low-hanging fruit, but it seems like something that could have just a real immediate impact even in the current crop year, getting better technical assistance in place and really helping the people that we're trying to help get access to the programs and do the right things to take advantage of those programs. The other thought that has been knocking around in my head is really sort of something maybe for the Ag Subcommittee to think about as they work through what they're doing. And that is, I feel like it's almost a structural issue with the farm programs and the Farm Bill. So it seems like a lot of these big Farm Bill programs work great if you are a big landowner, operator in certain areas of the country. But those programs, their programs just don't seem to be designed for everyone, and they're not easily accessible to everyone. And even if you do access it, it's not highly beneficial to you. And so that's kind of the idea, is that can the Ag Subcommittee help think about almost structural ways of looking at these farm programs to provide a greater equity, greater access. And so I'll just finish by saying, I think one of the positive things there too, the Secretary talked about talking to the traditional ag groups about the boards and commissions and who gets nominated and that sort of thing, and the department looking at who serves on those boards and commissions, because that could be really important in making sure that voices are there to articulate concerns about how to make these programs and things that the department does more accessible and just designed better to provide greater access and equity, which is what we all want to see. But with that, I'll stop. But a couple of thoughts, and as I say, maybe something for the Ag Committee to chew on as it goes forward. And just look forward to the work, and thank you.
Yeah, Member Rawls, thank you for raising some excellent points that we have noted. And I think your comments speak to not only accessibility of our programs, but that important part of the outreach and the technical assistance that many communities need in order to really not only access, but be able to apply and obtain funds from USDA. And the Secretary mentioned partnerships that we are funding opportunities for partnerships for cooperators who are closely engaged with many of the communities that we need to work more closely with in providing funds so that they can assist us with the outreach and technical assistance. The 2501 program, of course, is another one that's very important. So appreciate you raising those points, and we have noted those points.
Members of the subcommittee, any thoughts, responses to Member Rawls? Okay, well, Member Reed.
Yes, I just want to caution us on the technology piece. We talk about putting everything up online, and a lot of rural America does not have broadband technology nor access to the technology. So I would just like to caution us on that. I realize that those of us who own this commission and the subcommittee, we have access to that, but a lot of our rural communities do not. And so I think we need to bear that in mind as we move forward with this to ensure that they have access to the information as well.
Thank you, Member Reed. Excellent point.
Thank you. Any other comments, concerns, thoughts from members? No. Yes, Member Cousin.
Hi, just on that last point, I want to make sure that not only as the co-chair said, that we recognize the validity of the point that was made, but what can we do about it? What action can we take? I think that is a very important signal that we send to the community of the recognition of this committee to the limitations of many of those that we're working to serve, of their ability to participate. So I'm hopeful that we can come out of today's meeting, in fact, with a way to provide access to information to those who may not have access to the internet, but are quite interested in the workings of this commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cousin. I will do some thinking, and maybe we can circle back towards the end when we're doing final thoughts for the day to bring it up maybe, and maybe brainstorm of how we can do that. Member Horn.
Okay, I got it this time. I just want to just underscore Charlie Rawls' point. And I think that, as we all know, that access to land, labor, and capital is the key. And so when we're looking at systemic racism and how ag programs disadvantage small producers, we really need to go just beyond just looking at credit, but really looking at the farm programs, because Charlie's absolutely right. It tend to be in favor of large landowners, and their accesses disproportionately benefit them. And so I think part of the work of the Ag Subcommittee is to really also look at programs, not just credit and discrimination in credit, but how basically the Farm Bill has institutionalized systemic racism in agriculture through the programs. That needs to be really detailed out, and look at the recommendations, I believe, of the Jackson-Lewis report that went to that, some, and the other reports that have been done in the past. We really need to call prior administration and administrations to task to really kind of look at what has been done. And we just really need a very open, fair and honest approach to looking at the data, and to also instruct that if we need more data, we ought to appropriate money within the department to get at the data.
Member Horn, thank you. I just wanted to note, I appreciate you all in your thoughts about how to really get the agriculture subcommittee to focus. I want you to know that a little bit later in the day, we will look at opportunities that we've had to engage with stakeholders who came up with a list of things that perhaps could speak to what the Ag Subcommittee will focus on. And this conversation is very helpful in taking a look at a further discussion we'll have this afternoon.
Thank you, Deputy. I think Member Smith had a question. I want to make sure he is able to ask or provide his comment before I move on to.
Thank you. I actually am afraid this might be overkill, but I definitely think in all of agriculture, there are structural issues because a lot of things were developed 50 years ago, 70 years ago for a world that's changed. So access to broadband is certainly an issue in many places. A bigger issue is even if you have the access, do you have the time to get to read emails, to get on a webinar? And the smaller farms don't have the resources of the larger farms. A large farm has different specialties within the farm, and certain people are responsible for certain things. If you're a single operator, you're just trying to get through the day and dealing with all the other things. And so there is a structural issue, and it's not just USDA. I'd say it's all of agriculture. And maybe as we go along here, we can figure out how do we deliver the resources to the people. It can't be, well, you can get on, I mean, no offense to anything here, but just saying, well, it's on the website. If people are just trying to survive, they don't have time. At least that's been my experience. So how do you take it to them? And that's easier said than done. Thank you.
Member Smith, you're doing exactly what we need for you all to do, being candid and really open and ask us to take a look at some of these ideas. And, you know, we can benefit from your input, from everyone's input about how we can get information to people. We need your advice and your recommendations as much as we need the public's on how we can use more tools in our toolbox to make sure that they know what's going on, they know the opportunities are there, and that they can participate in those. And so, as Cecilia said, you know, we'll give some thought to that. And if we can come up with some specific thoughts before the meeting ends, we will certainly share that with everyone here.
Thank you, Deputy. Member Stanger-McGowan.
I just wanted to say I've been on all sides of this. I've been within the Department of Agriculture. I've served a FACA committee that was designed to address issues in Native American communities, working through the Civil Rights Office, and then from the outside, working for nonprofits, advocating for small farmers and ranchers. And the solution that we came up with, working from both the inside and outside, is understanding how the programs work, one, where they begin, where they end. Is it a state? Is the application handled in the state? Is it handled on a national scale? What's the process that's included in all the different parts of the department? Oftentimes they're siloed. So part of making the solutions viable was understanding how the programs work, what it looks like from the applicant's perspective. And then from the outside, what we find and or have found and what industry does is they make those suggestions and they make them in a manner where it's easy for the federal government to implement them. So drafting language specific to what your needs are. And I worked with the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative, and we did that within the farm, within the FNS, Food Nutrition Service. And we came in and we had a list of items we wanted addressed. We also discussed what can be changed administratively within the department now and what needed congressional approval and how we would go about that. And that's how I would like us to approach this. We all come from backgrounds and communities that we want to represent as we move through this process. And so we need to bring that leverage together. We all have this outside perspective, but we really need to utilize the internal perspective so that we can correlate our requests in the same language that's used within the department so they can make actionable items happen immediately. And that's one of the reasons why I volunteered to serve in this capacity, is because I've done this in the past. We have made substantial changes. We've made them through internal processes, but we've also made them through the Farm Bill. So I know that it sounds like hollow words, but I promise that this group will make actionable items, that you will see changes through this process. This is not just us talking.
Thank you, Member Stanger McLaughlin. Well said. Well said. Thank you.
I am going to have Member Sherrod and Lower Bash go ahead, and then after that, we'll take a break. Member Sherrod.
Hey, I just want to say that I know that looking at the chat, there's some concern about people from the grassroots. That's where most of my work has occurred through the years. And I can remember with other reports and other commissions or committees, they were intentional. We didn't have internet, wasn't as prevalent. So some meetings were held out. I can remember going to a barn where farmers gathered and they were able to give their input. I think as we work on this commission, we will have to figure out how to go to some of those individuals and not assume that somewhere down the line, some group, some school or whatever will reach out to them. I think we have to give them that opportunity to feel that they're important in this and that we're intentional about trying to make change.
Member Sherrod, you know, it's interesting that you bring that up. Co-Chair Rodriguez and I were having that very conversation about, you know, opportunities to engage with people where people are. So you bring up an excellent point. We will give consideration for how we can move forward. We are optimistic, one, that we will be able to meet in person in the near future, but also we will give thought to how we can have meetings in different locations and opportunities to engage, and we will deliberate about how we could do that. We've had those discussions, and that's a very important point. So I appreciate you raising that, understanding your background and working directly with communities.
Thank you.
Member Lower Bash.
Hi, thank you. So I was just going to say a similar thing, that it's just clear from the comments how much hunger there is for communication, and that it's not just for this commission, but trying to figure out ways for the programs, you know, whether it's a farmer or a staff recipient, to actually feel heard and have an opportunity to communicate. And to the extent that some of the systems that are supposed to create equity actually don't, or communicate, you know, the fact this big administrative structure can actually sometimes make it hard to actually just go out and talk to people. So figuring out maybe some of our recommendations can be processy about how to have ongoing two-way communication between the department and the people who could benefit from the programs.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. With that, I am going to have everyone go into a break, but just to let everyone know, when we are back, we will go into having Dr. Dwayne Goldman provide perspectives on equity here at USDA. But so with that, I will like to give us a potentially like 40-minute break. So we should be back. We will be back at 1:45. That gives everyone enough time to get their lunch. Before we do that, briefly, thank you to the public. Thank you for your comments. We really, really appreciate. Thank you. Okay. Well, welcome back from your break. Hopefully you were able to get a drink or do a little quick stretch. And now I would like to introduce to you Dr. Dwayne Goldman. He's Senior Advisor for Racial Equity. He will be providing his remarks and perspectives on equity, and then he'll open it up for a discussion with the members. Dr. Goldman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. And hello to this esteemed Equity Commission and Agriculture Subcommittee and the listening public. We're glad you're here. I'll echo the Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and Co-Chair Rodriguez's comments in thanking you all for this important work. I'll also reemphasize the Secretary's comments that, you know, unlike a lot of the other efforts to achieve this in the past, we're now focused on trying to determine how programs work or don't work, and more importantly, what resources and recommendations will be needed to get this department to a point of equity. We're looking at forward-looking things to design equitable programming to make this place more equitable. I'm always cautious about looking behind us, but in this case, I think a brief reflection of how we got to this point of inequity is warranted. And so I'll spend a few minutes talking about that, and we'll try and do that in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and then hopefully leave some time to dialogue with you on how we can move forward. We've stated before that different reports dating back to the 60s indicate a long history of discrimination at USDA. I think we're all pretty familiar with that. If you look at the research, the first substantial report was a U.S. Commission on Civil Rights that was done in 1965. And you might say, my God, why are you going back that far? Well, as I go through a few facts, I want you to think about the improvements or the lack of improvements that have been made from 1965 to today. 1965 was a pretty pivotal moment, as we're looking at the last date of February, Black History Month. Several of you I know are familiar with the fact that in 1964, just prior to that, there was a voting rights bill that was passed by the president. And for the first time, Black folk in the rural South and other places had a chance to express their opinions at the polls, processes they had been locked out of, which was very important. The 1957 Ag Census showed about 98% of all Negro farms were located in the South. And that's no mistake. Most Black farmers were descendants of slaves, and they were in the rural South, and that's where they practiced their craft. It was interesting, though, that in that 65 study, that all groups of what we now classify as BIPOC farmers were included, but 98% of those were Negro farms. And now I'm going to use the languages that was there. I know it's not necessarily appropriate, but persons of, according to that study, Mexican birth or ancestry, who were definitely not identified as being American Indians, they were identified as white in that census, which left Negroes constituting 90% of the folks in that study, with some notable exceptions for Native Americans in certain parts of North Carolina and Oklahoma. Here was the problem back then, just putting it in perspective. In 1965, cotton was king. This was a tenancy system that made it possible. And then, as had been for the last 30 or 40 years, everything was controlled by what was called local committees. These were typically Southern white farmers who were part of the system. And during that period, Southern white farmers raised their incomes, increased their farm size, improved housing, and advanced their education. A glaring exception to those advancements were 250,000 Negro farms who were still relied on cotton, tobacco, and peanuts for over 50% of their income. And during that period, the social and economic gap between whites and Blacks widened significantly. There were gross inequities in Negro and white extension services. Negro agents were relegated to serve Negro customers, farmers, and homemakers. And if they couldn't get to them, white agents refused service to their clientele. There were chronic problems with this system in that expectations were lowered and discrimination was rampant. White farmers were encouraged to plant to prosper versus Negro farmers who were encouraged to just plant enough to just kind of live at home. There were quotes that corn is not just it's not just a crop that Black folks can grow. Quote that we often fail to understand the irresponsibility of the Negro race, that Negroes are incapable of rice farming because it's too much for them to handle. I say all that, that's a dark part of history, but I say all that because it has future implications on the equity that we're trying to achieve today. Local committees of the time had a dramatic impact on who's in and who's out. From 1935 to 1959, which was a period largely covered by this study, all farm numbers decreased. White farm numbers decreased by 50%, but Negro farm numbers dropped by 75%. On the acres that were withdrawn from production, Negroes dropped 22 million acres, while whites increased their net acreage by 3 million and picked up the actual acres that were dropped. These decisions were made by a three-man committee, and in order to secure benefits from this system, you had to prove to this committee that you were of good character, were capable of repaying the debt, and that you could not acquire a loan outside of this system. And so, as you can imagine, a big problem back then was the absence of Negro representation on these local committees. In national and state offices, out of 1,500 people, only 40 were Black folk. And of 3,600 committeemen, there were no Black committeemen in this area. This showed up in the way loans were implemented. So of 1,733 farmers who borrowed money in the 1 year of the study, total of 6.3 million, 33% of those who received loans were white, but they received 2/3 of the fund, leaving 1/3 of the funds to the 6% of Negro farmers that were able to secure some type of loan. And in cases where Black farmers did secure loans, they were usually lower and with less favorable terms. A big problem, and the problem that was pointed out, was that Black farmers were completely left out of the decision-making process. So the virtual exclusion of them from the ASCS structure was the biggest problem because they were totally dependent on a white structure for their economic welfare. To sum it up, it said that as a group most depressed economically, most deprived educationally, and most oppressed socially, Negroes have been consistently denied access to many services, provided with inferior services when served, and segregated in federally financed agricultural programs whose very task was to raise their standard of living. The most serious problems that was consistently referred to was the consistent exclusion of Negroes from the local decision-making process. That, ladies and gentlemen, was 1965. Some years later, there were other reports that were done to look at the state of equity at USDA. In 1996, there was a study commissioned by the DJ Miller Group. There were still concerns around equal employment opportunity and civil rights. There were disparities still documented in farm size, in growth rates, in the support of USDA, in the revenue earned, in the diversity of producers, and the ownership status, whether you were renting or buying land. There were lower levels of program participation documented among minority producers, because by then minority producers had been expanded to include other groups, Asian Americans, Hispanic, Native Americans, etc. But minority farmers received a lower proportion of FSA payments, and there was also some discussion of the reasons for these discrepancies. Reasons such as a lack of knowledge of program availability, limited outreach to these communities, lack of representation on these decision-making committees, inconsistent application of data, and the impact that's been discussed earlier, the impact of farm size and its artificial inflation of this system. Inconsistency and irregularities in program yields was also cited as a factor. In 1997, there was a USDA civil rights study that was done. And again, it was pointed out that Black farmers were continually denied access to USDA programs. There was a point put out there that USDA was participating in a conspiracy to strip Black farmers of their land. And there was a litany of neglect and racial bias, unfair practices, and discrimination by county officials in order to perpetuate this conspiracy. Black and white small-scale farmers in that study were denied courtesy and respect that was given to larger scale farmers in terms of servicing and loans. What was also interesting, and it was pointed out that Hispanic, Asian American, and American Indian farmers all agreed that USDA had done more to hurt them than help them. We looked at NASS data in that period, and Black minority farm numbers had declined from 950,000 in 1920 down to about 60,000 in 1992, with Black farmers going from 925,000 down to 18,000, while slight increases were seen in the number of Hispanic, Asian, and women farmers, but they too were subjected to the same type of unfair practices. Let's jump forward to 2017, and we look at National Ag Statistics Service data. And it shows that there's still a disproportionate representation among various groups as it relates to farmland size, acres owned and rented, disparities in program payments as it relates to the number of farms receiving payments and the dollars received per farm in conservation reserve programs and other federal farm programs. There are noticeable gaps in farm loans and profitability as it relates to farms that receive CCC loans, as well as net cash farm income. In commodities and farm products that are produced under contracts, there was a notable discrepancy. Finally, in farms and acres that are protected via crop insurance programs, another significant gap among minority producers. These things led us to where we are. And no, it's not pretty, especially when you look at the fact that looking at very recent distribution of resources, ARC PLC payments, base acres, CFAP payments, CSP programs, CRP cost share programs. In all of those cases, there are documented instances where the percentage of minority participants is disproportionate to the percentage of those resources that they garner. Said another way, BIPOC, minority farmer groups, underserved farmer groups are not garnering their fair share of programs and program payments. And you would think this is an impossible task. I would submit that it's not. I would submit that a lot of the comment that I heard in the first half of this program was a beacon. I'll also submit that there is one program out there, the EQIP program, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, where the percentage of resources to minority producers exceeds the percentage of minority producers in the database. And you have to ask the question, why is that? Well, there were several instances where the Natural Resources Conservation Service acknowledged prior discrimination and put in meaningful things to address those inadequacies. I would argue that that's the kind of thinking that's going to be required for us to achieve equity in all those other programs that are out there. Let me close by just summarizing a few things, and I don't want to dwell on the past, but I also don't want to leave you with the impression that this department is not aware of the work that needs to be done. So since I started, it'll be a year tomorrow. Since I started, we've engaged in the serious work, and some of it is not pleasant, but we've engaged in the serious work of trying to transform this department into a racially equitable department. As the Secretary Vilsack pointed out, it started with a prioritization from the Biden-Harris administration, strongly reinforced by Secretary Vilsack and Deputy Secretary Bernal. And it's important that we get this one right. And as the Secretary said, it's important that we work with this Equity Commission and the Agriculture Subcommittee to hold us accountable and give us those actionable recommendations that make sure that we get it right. In a cross-departmental, in some listening sessions that we held, I just want to point out a few things before I turn it up for questions. It was pointed out that USDA has a history of discrimination and racial inequity. And when you go back to that history I just went over, you see that we now have evidence and are keenly aware of that. We know that we have barriers that are preventing all customers from participating equitably in USDA programs. We know that we have issues around access to land, access to capital, simplifying applications and processes so that a larger portion of our customer base can participate in those. We are aware of the fact that we probably have some inconsistency in the way some of our programs are implemented, and the fact that interpretation or misinterpretation can oftentimes result wrongly in who gets the benefit versus who doesn't get the benefit. We are aware of the impediments of the lack of translation services or for people with limited English proficiency. We are aware of the concerns there that need to be addressed. In these listening sessions, we're focused on agriculture, but we were also made keenly aware of some gaps in our food and nutrition services programs. And in full transparency, as a former food stamp recipient, I know the importance and the impact that those programs can have. And I know the importance of being able to get those right so that they can meet their intended purposes, okay? We know, full admit, that in our FPAC programs, our farm programs, those programs that meet our farmers kind of on the turn row, in the gardens or on the ranch, we know that there are some equities that are chronic and need to be addressed. And so that is the reason that we are simultaneously standing up a subcommittee focused on agriculture so that we can root out racial discrimination and bias, so that we can help address some of the problems, heirs property, fractionated land, inconsistency in programs. We've had to address those problems in order to achieve the kind of equity that we're trying to achieve. We understand fully that because of this unpleasant history, that USDA is operating from a position of distrust. I think we've made a little progress, but we have a ways to go. We understand the importance of working with the Equity Commission, the Subcommittee on Agriculture, the minority serving institutions that have been mentioned before, to help us gain access to those customers that need it so that we can move to a position of equity. We understand that our handling of certain civil rights issues need improvements. We are keenly aware of these things, which brings me to the hardest part of this morning's session, was sitting there and listening to the comments and wanting to weigh in and say something. But I appreciate the question and answer session and some of the things that were brought to light. Let me stop there, Ms. Hernandez, and just see if there may be questions, comments for me that I might could address.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Goldman. We have now 10 minutes for questions from the members. It looks like a member Eubanks has a comment or question.
I have a comment, and I want to thank Dr. Goldman, because the one thing that I had not heard was that trust factor. And that is a key aspect of what we will do. Having spent 26 years at Southern University, which is an 1890 land grant institution, and now I sit here at LSU, trust is an important factor. I've worked with farmers that have literally said, I don't trust USDA. When I listened at you, Dr. Goldman, it was exciting, because what I heard this morning, that we're gonna have a high level of transparency. When I heard you say trust, the next thing that came to mind with me was transformation. Bringing about a change, allowing individuals to come to the table and be valued for who they are and what they can do. So that's just a comment I wanted to share with you. Thank you for saying the trust word, because it needed to be said.
Thank you. But let me well, thank you, Dr. Eubanks. Great seeing you. I want to acknowledge one other thing too. And I want to say this to you as commissioners or members of the subcommittee. When we get into this work, you might get drug in. People might say that you are now part of the problem. And I would encourage you, as I've had to talk to myself, don't take it personally. We didn't get here under the 1 year that I've been at USDA. We didn't get here under the secretary's prior 8 or his 1. This was, to his point, this was a systematic system of discrimination that took us some time to get here. And it's probably going to take some hard work, some self-revelation to get us from this point. But what's at stake is equity. And you know, I'm serious about it. And I know from the questions and the comments this morning that you are too. And I look forward to rolling up our sleeves and getting with it.
Thank you, Dr. Goldman. Any other questions or thoughts? Member Redding?
Dr. Goldman, thank you. It's good to see you. And again, thank you for taking on this important work. There was a reference earlier to the percentage of staff that are BIPOC in USDA, particularly in the field offices as well as the committees. Do you have current data on both the FSA committee representation of BIPOC and employees that you could share with us, please?
Cecilia, I hope someone is noting it. We'll need to get back to you with the numbers, Mr. Redding. But I will say this, and the secretary alluded to it at the opening of the meeting. There's 2 parts of this process. Okay, so one part of this is to look at equity to our external customers, and as has been stated before, it can't be about us without us, right? And so a significant part of making sure that we are providing the right kinds of services is making sure that we have the right kinds of people to provide those services. And it's not about necessarily a number as much as it is about making sure that this department reflects the public that we're trying to serve. And so diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility has to be a part of it. In fact, there is an additional executive order from the White House that addresses that. And I see this effort merging at some point so that we can ask those critical questions as to whether or not this department at all levels. I mean, when you look at someone as talented, capable, and intelligent as the deputy secretary, and she just happens to be the first Black woman to be in that position, it's great. I mean, but we have to make sure that from top down to the entry level person coming in, that this department is reflective of the people that we're trying to serve. And so part of this process has to be a transparent and open discussion with this commission and this committee as to what that composition looks like. So Cecilia, we just have to make sure that we provide that information to the commission.
Yes, we can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Member Horn.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Goldman. If just for a minute, I just would like to just contextualize some of the points that Dr. Goldman made. And that is, when you look at the data in the classic civil rights period, which is from Brown versus Boyd in 54 to 1969. And I'm looking at North Carolina data, and in other places, it was just even more wretched. And I'm lifting up what happened, the ground zero Black land loss and Black farmers' losses is South Carolina. And I just want to compliment the work of lawyer Jenny Stevens and her program. But in North Carolina, in 1954, you had like 22,600 farmers. And by the end of 69, it was 9,600. And then when you look at, the acreages of farms and owned by Black farmers, in 54, it was close to 1.1 million. And then by 69, it was 550,000, representing close to a 48% decline. And when you round out the number of the Black farmers, it was about 57.2 in decline. And so for me, when I look at those numbers and where we're at today in terms of the attack of civil rights in this country and the immediate filing of lawsuit to basically put a stop to the emergency relief for BIPOC farmers, it really does paint that picture that we're going back to a period that has never really ended, but really accelerating and deaccelerating, if you will, any progress or any attempt that can be made, as Secretary Vilsack says, to rebalance the scale. And so for me, it would really, really be helpful for our work if we can get at the data that's in the Farm Bill, so we know how much the land ownership is for Black farmers, heirs property and farmland, that we know we get data on the loan programs. I think the more data that we have that paints an solid image that can't be attacked in these lawsuits, the better we all are moving forward. And so that to me makes the work of this commission even more important and essential to stem the tides of land loss and losses of farmers within the BIPOC population. So I just want to just thank the department for convening this process, and we all look forward to the work, because I think this is critical work at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Horn.
Member Horn, and excuse me, Dr. Goldman. Dr. Goldman, I really appreciate all the comments that you made. Thank you very much. Dr. Horn, we think about how this is going to move from what we say to what actions we show. We fully understand that. That is the biggest challenge and expectation of this effort going forward. And that data where we start and where we end is going to tell the story. So you all let us know exactly what data you need. We will provide that data for you because we have to show change, and the data is going to show the change and tell the story. So we will ensure that we get this committee, the subcommittee, everything that you need in terms of what data you need to see. You let us know. We'll make sure that you have that. Thank you.
I'm an agronomist by training. Several of you probably know that. And we try to work off of facts, but there's another element to this. You know, when you look at these data objectively, some things become pretty clear. When I look around the room, and I know some of your stories, it becomes even more clear, and it becomes a little personal because you have experienced people that have either you have experienced the discrimination, or you know people are intimately related to people who have experienced this kind of discrimination that's kept certain farmers from following certain trends. But I want to go back to the data because I would subject that there's another reason that we have to be rooted in the data.
Mm-hmm.
I would subject that as hard as it is to imagine, think about people who honestly may not know these disparities that we're talking about. Think about people that think that, and I suspect that there are some that think that you are a victim of your own circumstances. And I think part of this process has to be being able to sit down with folks. And I don't know that you will convince everybody. I'm not trying to paint a utopia here, but I think we should at least try to say, because of these disparities that exist, these are the things that have to be done in order for American agriculture to maintain its position in world agriculture and play our legitimate role in feeding, fueling, and clothing a growing population, and making sure that more and more of all of our farmers, or those of us who love agriculture, making sure that they have a fair chance at doing their craft without undue intervention from unfair practices and policies.
Thank you. Thank you. Deputy Secretary, final remarks before we move on to the oral piece of the agenda, oral comment piece of the agenda?
Actually, co-chair would like to ask a question, and I know Member Lee also has her hand up.
Okay, yeah. Perfect.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary. So the report was just excellent, Dr. Goldman, in terms of what you shared with us and helped us put everything into perspective and how this has gone on systematically now for decades upon decades. And so that was extremely helpful. I'm just wondering, can you or someone do something similar for us, read the farm worker population in our country? Because that's been primarily, at least dating back into the 30s and so forth, or I should say after a certain period of time, it's always been minority farm workers. And what impact has the legislation, has politicians, has USDA really had on farm workers? Because I know dating back to, in particular, to the Fair Labor Standards Act that was passed back in 1938. At that point, from that point on, even prior to that, but that point made it very clear that farm workers were excluded from almost every piece of legislation that applied to other workers in our country, and excluded farm workers in that particular way. And so even today, now back in 2022, still most farm workers don't have access to the basic benefits, don't have worker compensation, don't have unemployment insurance, aren't covered by minimum wage laws. And you go on and on and on. You look at the pesticides and you look at heat conditions out there, and people die of heat exhaustion and everything else. And so unfortunately, I don't think the USDA has been very responsive to the needs of farm workers throughout history. And it would be really helpful to hear from your viewpoint, to look at that data and to understand it so that, again, we can utilize this data to help us move forward. Because I am very excited and very confident that we are going to move forward as a result of this commission coming together.
Mr. Rodriguez, thanks for the question. And all I can say is, please help us, because, and I might have said this before, when we started this process, we were looking at what we would need or the kind of representation we would need on the Equity Commission and the Ag Subcommittee to accomplish this work, to make that more permanent change, as the Secretary talked about. And one of the groups that I personally, Dwayne Goldman, had not thought about was farm workers. Fast forward to February 28th, 2022, when the co-chair of this commission now has a wealth of experience and expertise in farm workers. And since then, I have had the privilege of sitting down with farm workers and listening to them explain the path from a farm worker to a farm owner in places like California, Texas, and other places. And that's an important part of what we do. Now, I'm a Black guy, Mr. Rodriguez, and I grew up in the rural South. And I grew up with my eyes open. And so I'm kind of familiar with what went on there. I'm not as familiar with the farm worker group, but as part of this process, as part of us working together, I'm confident that we can bring that into this discussion and do what's right by the farm worker group. So I appreciate the question.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lee?
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Bowman. What co-chair Rodriguez had said earlier. I'm really encouraged by Dr. Bowman's commitment to trust. I would like to add, in addition to building trust, a key component is representation. The Secretary earlier mentioned will be a lot of opportunities to bring in more folks to the USDA, and I would suggest and encourage that you step the efforts to make sure that.
Member Lee, we're having trouble hearing you.
Thanks to the cable podcast. Can you hear me now?
It's still kind of going off and on. We'll try more time, and if not, we'll make sure that you provide your comment in a little bit.
Submitted in writing. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll make sure, Member Lee, you provide your comments in a little bit. Hopefully, your connection will be better. But now I do want to move on to the oral comments part of the agenda. If we can get the slide up, but yes. And so, as we mentioned earlier, part of the Federal Advisory Committee Act requirements is to provide the public with an opportunity to provide written and oral comments. Again, written comments were received prior to the meeting have been provided to members. We will accept written comments until March 15th. Please submit them to the Equity Commission at usda.gov email. This session will focus on the oral comments that were provided. And so with this, I will hand it over to Lionel. You're on mute.
Thank you, DFO Fernandez, and good afternoon to our public participants and also the Equity Commission today. I would first like to call the name of Jorge Boteo. Jorge Boteo. We will bring you up and you will have a chance to provide your comments.
Lionel, I don't believe Jorge or Naomi Cypress is here.
Thank you, sir. Let's go to Joseph Davis Sr. Joseph Davis Sr.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I've been following this with a lot of excitement, but also with a lot of, let's just say, reservations. I've listened to Dr. Goldman speak, and that is my encouragement and the reason why I wanted to speak today. And I speak today on an issue of federal regulations, and it's important for me to raise this issue on participation as it deals with USDA. It's 13 CFR 124, which is Section 8, the program. And as you know, it's operated out of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. And as we move forward with this holistic approach on gathering the data, meaning the raw data, but then analyzing the data. And it's this old term called he who controls the raw data controls the narrative. Let's put the right narrative that is out there instead of the historical wrong data and narrative that has been out there that has so long disadvantaged Black farmers. I would say this, there was recently a report that the Inspector General just did on USDA as it dealt with this issue in 2018. And my concern is this, is that the certification process for utilization of businesses who are providing services for USDA may be flawed. And the reason why is that under one of the sections, on Section 7, where a woman-owned business had, a white male-owned business had been turned over to a woman-owned business, and that woman-owned business had been doing business with the USDA, and that the threshold for doing business was 15 million, but they discovered, the Inspector General discovered that the business was doing over $112 million worth of business. Until we close that loophole on who's eligible to provide those services as far as certification, and also provide the services where when you control the data, when you issue the data, and you work with Black farmers to give them the resources that they have, and not just to give them the resources that they need and they want, and not just give them half or even a portion of the resources that they deserve, we're going to continue to fall back into this place. So I hope that the commission takes that under consideration as far as the federal regulation and also the utilization of Black businesses and brown businesses and women-owned business that are eligible and certified to do business with the USDA. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I want to remind each one of our public comments, you have 90 seconds to make your remarks. Next on the list is Mr. John Hussman. Good afternoon, Mr. Hussman.
Lionel, it looks like John Hussman and Henrietta Isaboke are not here. Next up, we will have Kelly Jackson.
Kelly Jackson.
We could come back to Kelly. Next up, we have John Jamerson.
Hello, everyone. This is John Jamerson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to first say thank you to all of you guys for what you're doing. We're looking forward to working with you guys in the future. I work with Legacy Taste of the Garden. We're currently doing a Indiana Black Loam workshop where we're bringing together the USDA agents to all the local areas. We're doing it in 5 cities: Evansville, Fort Wayne, Gary, Bloomington, and Indianapolis. One of the main concerns that we have and that we've discovered since doing this is that there are special grants and stuff that are out there for BIPOC farmers. And what we've discovered is that we're still not getting seen. We're still not being reached out to. And even when these things are coming out, such as the local food partnership agreement, that they're taking upwards to 3/4 of that off the table without even considering us for things. And so my thing is how can we work together to make sure that these things that are going out to the Black farmers are actually going to them and not just being dispersed to everyone else. And with that being said, thank you guys once again.
Thank you, sir. Next, Mr. Joe James. Good afternoon, Mr. James.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, I am a Black climate tech entrepreneur and farmer who, using my patented CRBBP process, plants and then multitask very special biocrops to cost effectively capture large amounts of CO2, remediate air, soil, and water, and then make bioproducts like a safer and sustainable alternative to carbon black filler powder. A few years ago, I was aggressively recruited by one of the ARS, Agricultural Research Services, research centers involved in filler powder research to enter into a 2-year cooperative research and development agreement requiring me to pay a $40,000 fee, then to also incur $40,000 in additional cost to cooperatively make bio-based filler powders. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a governmental form of catch and kill, as the ARS soon breached the terms of the CRADA and secretly filed a CRADA-related patent application for a process which actually ended up not working. The ARS then refused to file a patent for my process, which did work. Sadly, neither the ARS administrator nor the Civil Rights Office at that time ever responded to my many calls and emails. Although 3 utilities are fortunately now actively partnering with me to deploy our process, ARS's breach impairs my protected manufacturing of my filler powder product and has required me to apply and pay for a patent myself, a cost that should have been covered by the CRADA. Commissioners, I need your help. I hope you'll create a sense of urgency within the USDA so that farmers and entrepreneurs of color adversely impacted by the USDA don't go out of business before a matter is resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll have Ms. Natalie Maxwell. Ms. Maxwell.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission today. My name's Natalie Maxwell. I'm a senior staff attorney with the National Housing Law Project. We're a legal advocacy center focused on increasing, preserving, and improving affordable housing, as well as expanding and enforcing the rights of low-income residents and homeowners. So while we understand why the commission is starting its work with the focus on farming and agriculture, we just want to highlight that there are a number of opportunities to address the same historic racial discrimination and inequities acknowledged by Secretary Vilsack this morning, as well as the commission in USDA single and multifamily housing programs. And for that reason, would recommend that the commission form a rural housing subcommittee. So I mean, this is especially needed given the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on housing security for people of color, especially for those in rural communities. Even prior to the pandemic, racial and ethnic disparities existed as to who was being served by the housing programs. For example, a number of eligible immigrant families have been systematically excluded from affordable rental housing located in rural communities throughout the country. And racial disparities continue to persist in the 502 Guaranteed Loan Program, which serves a much lower percentage of people of color than are served by the 502 Direct Loan Program. We're concerned that these racial disparities reflect both historic and ongoing discriminatory practices in the rental market and the lending industry. And we'll follow those comments up in writing. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Ms. Maxwell. Next, we'd like to have Brooke Sinclair. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello, thank you. Yes, so I was very surprised today and grateful to hear Secretary Vilsack's comments about accountability and recommendations. I would specifically like to point out that the current lawsuit that he very briefly glimpsed over is a result of a conflict of interest from the gentleman who heads up the Texas Department of Agriculture. And I'm particularly curious about what sort of, since the secretary mentioned accountability, what sort of harsh penalties, conflict of interest policies, and what sort of accountability does he actually plan to immediately put into place? And since we've already touched over questions about truth and trust, and I will go directly to questions about reparations. for the descendants of chattel slavery, seeing as though land is what it is. There's not going to be any more land. We were promised 40 acres and a mule, and that is land. And then that land was specifically stolen because we were unable to read. What does the council plan to do to rectify that? Thank you.
Thank you for your time today. I now would like to go to Ms. Henrietta Isabok. Good afternoon.
We had her for a second, but I don't think she's here anymore.
All right. Well, lastly, let's go to Ms. Tambra Stevenson. Good afternoon, Ms. Stevenson.
Ms. Stevenson, your mic is muted.
Ms. Stevenson? We want to give you a chance to talk this afternoon, Ms. Stevenson. Is there anyone here that has just joined from the public commenters that we've passed your name? We'd like to come back to you. Is there anyone else here? Ms. Stevenson?
Hi, this is Nikki Nesberry. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ms. Nesberry, please go ahead.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.
Yes, I just didn't hear my name called, but I was on the list, so I will keep my comments brief. I am speaking on behalf of the Land Trust Alliance. We are a membership organization of about 950 land trusts across the country. I just want to take a moment to say thank you for your service to all those who are on the commission and the Ag Subcommittee. So land trusts have been long committed partners with the USDA. We regularly utilizing Farm Bill programs. Our members have worked with landowners in the communities they serve to conserve over 61 million acres of land across the country. The Alliance is committed to supporting land trusts and the USDA in addressing systemic inequity and creating equitable pathways for historically underserved landowners to benefit from USDA programs in an equitable manner. We applaud the creation of the commission and echo the importance of building trust and accountability between the USDA and historically underserved landowners and communities. We also encourage the USDA to expand where possible financial and technical assistance and also to develop new outreach and education materials to help underserved landowners and partners in terms of being supported in successfully conserving their land. And finally, we encourage the USDA to work with subject matter experts to expand tools and resources to address heirs property issues. I know some of the folks on the commission have the expertise, and we just applaud and encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson, for your remarks. Before we close this section out, I'd like to go back to Ms. Tambra Stevenson. Well, DFO Hernandez, I believe that we're all complete now. We've given everyone a chance to have their remarks. I'll return it back to you.
Thank you, Lionel. And just a reminder to those in the public, we in order for you to provide oral comments, you did need to register by February 1st. And so unfortunately, we cannot have members right now provide members of the public right now to speak orally if you didn't put in your request by the 21st. And so with that, we will now, well, one last reminder is, please, members who provided oral comments, if you want to provide a longer comment, you can please email your written comment to our equity commission at usda.gov. We will take it and provide it to all of the members. And with that, we have ended this portion. We will go take a 20-minute break, and we will be back at 3 instead of 3:15. And when we come back, we are going to be covering the agriculture subcommittee charge and then open it up to reflections, thoughts, and next steps. And so with that, we will resume at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Welcome back, everyone, from your break. The Deputy Secretary will now walk us through the Agriculture Subcommittee charge, and then we will open it up for a Q&A session with the members. Deputy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, DFO Hernandez. Appreciate everyone. Thank you for the great discussion. Dr. Goldman, really appreciate his comments and the comments that were shared, the public comment. And for those who were not able to make public comment, we can see comments and all the comments that are being made. But just welcome back and on to the Agriculture Subcommittee and their charge. So as we mentioned earlier, the intent is to form a subcommittee to delve deeper into issues that will require more analysis. And those issues and the findings will roll up from the subcommittee into the recommendation that the commission will make and provide to the secretary. So the first subcommittee, as we have mentioned, will focus on agriculture. Now, the goal is to launch a second subcommittee on rural community and economic development in the next couple of months. That committee will delve into broader issues pertaining to rural development programs, some that have been talked about a little bit today. The Agriculture Subcommittee will be charged with providing recommendations on issues and concerns related to agriculture and how to optimize USDA programs to advance equity. So here are the expectations of the subcommittee. One, in consultation and with support from the DFO, convene to achieve the goals directed by the Equity Commission. Two, to leverage the diversity of expertise, perspectives, and ideas within the subcommittee membership to meaningfully drive the right conversation, analyze issues, and prioritize short and long-term recommendations. Three, to identify the primary and systemic barriers that underserved producers, and by that we mean farmers, ranchers, forest landowners and operators, cooperatives, and farm workers that they face today. And in conjunction with the Deputy Secretary DFO and other USDA resources, determine if these barriers require administrative, discretionary, regulatory, or statutory remedies, and develop and provide a report to the Equity Commission for consideration. The subcommittee will develop its own plan of work and timeline to deliver the recommendations to the Equity Commission to deliberate on during subsequent meetings. So based on stakeholder input received through various mechanisms, including public requests for information sessions conducted last year, this list is the starting point for the subcommittee to consider in terms of the goals that we focus on. One, improving technical assistance necessary for navigating USDA programs and services. Two, improving access to capital. Three, improving access to programs and services related to agriculture and land use. Four, implementing programs and services to mitigate effects of climate change, including improvements in risk management, conservation, and forestry programs. Five, addressing access to land, including financing programs and addressing unique issues related to heirs property, fractionated land, and other land access retention issues. Six, increasing market access to facilitate expanded access for value-added opportunities, for example, processing, trade, marketing. Seven, enhancing customer service via improved USDA staffing, training, and transformation of the organizational culture within USDA. Eight, reviewing supporting functions such as county committees, conservation districts, and advisory boards. 9, improving use of data and technology, both to ensure access and to increase accountability. 10, improving USDA performance measurement and program evaluation so that implemented recommendations can be monitored, tracked, and reported with real outcomes. And 11, making recommendations for ways to hold USDA accountable by requesting an implementation strategy and an action plan on recommendations. The subcommittee will decide on how to prioritize focus on these issues. Now, there is room for the subcommittee to identify additional areas of focus if the subcommittee deems necessary. And with that, I'd like to open up for questions from the commission and subcommittee members, and also some thoughts of how we should go about moving forward with prioritizing these issues. Thank you, BFO Hernandez.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Any questions from the members? No questions? Okay, well then what I'm going to do is looking at this list that that the deputy provided a few minutes ago, what issues based on your interest would you like to focus on? And maybe we can bring that slide back up.
Actually, if the two slides, the
That
goal
one.
and the one, can we go to the one just before it as well? Just briefly. Thank you.
There, let's see who has their hands up. Member Lomelli.
Yes, thank you. And I think just, based on everything that we've spoken, and we know that historically, the injustices that have been happening, we also have data that's very old. So one of the things that we should also prioritize is that USDA must take the steps to protect and improve research such as the NASS Farm Labor Survey, including by issuing regulations to mandate that the FLS that measures the wages paid to farm workers is funded yearly. I know that, this is data that's either old or just not, doesn't reflect nationwide the population of farm workers. Also would like to be, I'm interested and happy to contribute to the reports that we have collected nationwide. And our organization has been just recently through the pandemic been serving farm workers, and where, it's smaller numbers, but it is in the thousands, and it is reflected in at least in 15 different states. Just wanted to point that in terms of the data, the importance of having more relative and accurate data.
Thank you, Member Lomelli. Yes, and if you could provide that data to us, we will make sure that everyone from the commission and subcommittee has it. Looks like there was another question from another member. Yes. Member Lawrence?
You were asking about prioritizing. I guess I would like to talk about prioritizing enhancing the customer service, because I know earlier we were talking about translation of services, but enhancing our customer service, I think, is so super important, because if we have a chance to have the people who are working in our offices, have them be able to slow down and explain what's going on with the programs, so our customers can understand. There might be people who haven't been in those offices for a number of years, who really need to take the time face to face to understand and need to know, because a lot of our people need to know how they have extra layers that they need to bring in, extra paperwork. So they need to understand eligibility and different things like that. And if all they get, if the people working in the offices don't have the time, and they just hand them this big folder and say, here's the stuff, bring it in. And then the customers are overwhelmed and then they give up. You know, we need to have improved customer service. They need to be able to take the time to spend with the customers. So I think that's a huge priority to improve our participation. So we need to prioritize that.
Yeah, Member Lawrence, I really appreciate that. You know, customer service is something that we have already started to have a lot of conversations about, you know, realizing that experience when someone comes into a local office, the experience that they have in that office, you know, whether they're filing an acreage report, whether they are applying for a loan, makes a huge difference in how they are treated. And that is a very important issue. You know, we have established some equity action plans, and I think that the work of this subcommittee can really help us think about how we can move forward very quickly with some recommendations. So I'm very glad that you raised that.
Thank you. Member Smith.
Not too good with this mute button. Thank you. Just following up on the last comment, and I really am almost overwhelmed with my ignorance on a lot of things here. But I don't know how job performance is measured, and where individuals are held, you know, have certain standards, metrics that they're accountable for. But I would think that we talk about USDA like it's a monolith, but in the end, it comes down to individuals. And it would seem like, I don't know how employees of USDA that are out maybe in field offices and the point of contact for delivering services, but it seems like their performance, one of the measurements ought to be some metrics in terms of success and numbers, and in terms of the delivery of services, not just, it's hard to, if we're not measuring things, it's hard to know how we're doing, I guess is what I don't know if that's making sense at all, but.
It is, Member Smith, and it goes completely to one of our lists here. But so yes, thank you for adding to that. And you know, I think you're spot on with your recommendation. Member Corley.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a question. I hope it's clear, and I hope it's not been asked. I feel ignorant if it had been. As I was trying to think about prioritizing this list, is there a best practice that you could share with us as a commission and subcommittee to work together? Because I think what I'm struggling with is, since this is so intertwined and things are inextricably linked to each other, that a priority list is hard to do if you're not thinking about left foot, right foot in the same order. How do we as a commission work with our subcommittee in a way that's effective? Because they see things perhaps in one way, we see it in another, but we want the same thing at the end. I don't know if that's a question, but as I'm thinking through, you know, my change management framework, like you have to be able to see the same thing and know where the outcome is that you want to share. And I'm not sure that I see that right now because there's so many things here. So I guess, again, I don't know if that's a question or a comment, but if somebody could maybe share reaction to that, perhaps Cecilia, yourself, or the Deputy Secretary, or Mr. Rodriguez. I just would like some clarity on that.
Member Corley, you know, this is a long list, and I would dare say everything on this list is important. However, you know, opening it up to the commission, we may need to prioritize. Maybe the way we prioritize is, you know, what are some actions that on this list we can address quickly that will lead to some early change, or that will be the precursor for other changes. And, you know, I will, of course, the committee and subcommittee make recommendations, but, you know, in order to address a long list, you know, to eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. So we need to look at this list and see what are some things that can have an early and big impact, and what are some things that we may need to start digging into so that we can make those longer term and valuable impacts as well. That's just a suggestion I have, but please, everyone, please jump in with your feedback here.
Yes, and members, please don't wait for me to call you. I know there's a lot of hands right now, but I think that's when maybe if members from the staff, if we could pull the slide down and have the members have them, yeah, and then we can go ahead. So please, any member Horn.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I am particularly interested in the civil rights track. And it wasn't really prioritized, but one could weave it into some of the stems of in the list. But I think because that has been a place where we need to resolve civil rights complaints, we need to know how many been filed in the last 10, 15, 20 years, what got resolved, what is still pending. And where are these civil rights matters arising from, which offices, which state, which locality, and then for us to really acknowledge that if we don't have across the board implementation of the receipt for services, of which a farmer needs to know that he went in, asked for services, didn't get it, so he can consult with or get the help of a community-based organization to help file a complaint, that if we can't get information to get at those complaints, then it sort of is like meaningless. And, yes, I think institutional bias, racial bias is important. Training on that, but really for me, it's what's the track record. I realize there are fits and starts, right? There are different, even though over the last 20 years, you have 3 presidencies, so you're gonna see a lot of variation in the treatment of civil rights, but I think it's important that we have information on these complaints. If you have to, of course, redact them, of course, because you can't put out the farmer's name, but we at least need to look at it and be intentional about how do we resolve civil rights complaints and get some recommendation from the Ag Committee based on their experience in their profession and what they have observed in the field. I think that's critically important.
Thank you, Member Horn. I'm going to call on some of the members that we haven't heard from today. Member Johnson, Member Derek Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for putting together this first hearing. I think we should prioritize based on a couple of standards. What are the issues that need immediate attention? And we need to get the best thinking from the commission to figure out what are those things. Secondly, what are the issues that will have long-lasting impact? I'm hearing a lot about farmers. I think it's important, but USDA is such a large agency, it touches on so many other things. And then what are the things that could spur development, people development, economic development that's inclusive, that could live beyond just one administration? I'm thinking in terms of food services for kids across the country, both in urban and rural, and how inclusive that is to create a healthy food source that's diversified with many individuals being able to participate outside of the mega food providers, but also the housing policy. How do we spur opportunity for individuals to participate in rural home, the rural home program? The electric cooperative is a key economic developer. They rely heavily on USDA for all types of subsidies, some that I'm not even aware of. And how do we create more transparency, accountability, and a more level opportunity for people to participate as board members? So for the NAACP, we're looking for that systemic impact that goes beyond this administration. And we're going to assign staff to work with USDA, if directed properly, to help really clarify where those opportunities exist. This is great for the country, but we want to make sure it's long lasting for the communities.
Thank you, Member Johnson. All very good ideas. Member Sarah Vogel.
Hello, everybody. I would like to raise a couple of issues that I learned from years of litigating against USDA and also serving on the Council for Native American Farmers and Ranchers, which was a result of the Keepsakle case. And it functioned in a way like this, but aimed at reducing the barriers to participation of Native Americans. And I think it existed for 6 or 7 years. So I think the recommendations that were gathered in that era would be very good to bring up again. One, and then this is 2 like high level observations. I noticed in the years of litigation that sometimes it seemed as though USDA would be willing to make changes, but the Department of Justice was in a fight mode, just fighting against lawsuits. So I think conversations between the secretary and the head of the Department of Justice, the divisions that handle litigation, might be worthwhile to see whether some of these cases, because I'm aware of cases that were brought in the 70s for race discrimination, fought by the Department of Justice, and the little litigants folded because they did not have the muscle to fight the Department of Justice. So those are things. Another thing is, as we worked on the Council for Native American Farmers and Ranchers, we often saw that sometimes it took the cooperation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and USDA to achieve some of the reforms and advances that were needed in Indian country. And so again, I think the secretary will need to have a really strong liaison with the with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So those are 2 or several areas that I think would be worth exploring. And I'm very sorry. I don't know if this came up. I had an internet outage for the last segment. So anyway, I think that the experiences of the Council for Native Americans would be good to highlight. We called it CNAFR, which is easier than the long word, but those recommendations by CNAFR, and there's quite a bit of correspondence, quite a few recommendations, and many of them were resolved, some not. So there's always work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Vogel. Yes, no one brought this up, so thank you. We will make sure that those recommendations are provided to the commission members and subcommittee members. I want to call on Mr. Rosales first, and then Member Rajay Hidler.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I just wanted to first of all recognize there's just a lot of comments that are coming in through the chat, and obviously this is a very complex issue. You know, I'm not exactly sure I knew what I was signing up for, but I can tell you that it's going to require a lot of dialogue, and not just between and among the members, but also with some of the other subcommittees. And we mentioned this a little bit last time, just how issues around food and agriculture are just closely tied to issues about housing and transportation, access to education. And from what I understand, that there are going to be a few other subcommittees being formed under the direction of the Equity Commission. And I think it's important to have that dialogue, and those folks, of course, dialogue with their communities and constituencies to try and get everyone's voices around the table, because obviously I don't think these are issues, and this is just a comment, but I don't think these are issues that we can tackle one bullet point at a time. These are conversations I believe that we have to have that, address issues about equity across all these sectors, that include issues around farm labor, all the way to access to farm capital, and capital in terms of both access to financial capital, but also to access to intellectual capital and social capital, and then also recognizing cultural capital. and that cultural wealth that is required to advance the agenda that Secretary Vilsack talked about. I just wanted to echo Member Johnson's comment, because I think for a lot of farmers that we work with and that we serve, and a lot of other folks that we work with in our communities, this is a triage moment. I mean, we can take a long vision and try and plan for the future, but we also have to help immediately. And I'm not exactly sure what that means, but I do know that we have to do both at the same time, you know, and so, you know, acting so that we can help folks now, we have to do that. And you know, I'm sure that's what the conversations are going to be about, but then also trying to have a really clear plan as to how we're going to address this kind of broader, in a broader sense that cuts across all those different issues that are inherently interconnected. You know, we cannot solve issues around equity without talking about farm worker rights. You know, it could be somewhere, you know, at the same time of talking to access to capital. So I just, you know, I'm very honored to be here. I know there's a lot of hard work ahead, but I wanted to recognize all these comments in the chat. They're dizzying, but they're really important because they're all the same. You know, they all come back to the same issues. So thank you again for the opportunity to serve.
And can I butt in there real quick? That is so super important, because in 2 counties that are super close to me in these rural areas in South Dakota, we cannot get a district conservationist because there's no place to live. They can't find a place to live. There's no house, there's no apartment. They have to drive about 40 or 50 miles to a neighboring town.
Thank you, Member Rosales and Member Lawrence. I think Member Rage Fiddler was up next.
Thank you. As I look at this wonderful starting place, as you mentioned on the list, and try to think through how on earth do we prioritize it in the amount of time we have, I just started to look at how they're clustered, and it seemed to me like they're clustered in what. For the first 6 are the what, and then there's the who, and then there's the how. And so then as I think, how do you then prioritize those? I think about like a grid of the impact and scattering them by impact and likelihood of success in the short term. And especially in terms of our span of control and the USDA span of control, because some of them may be outside of that span of control. And just based on my listening from thousands of farmers as a hypothesis, I guess I'd say access to capital and access to land are things that have been repeated to me over and over again over decades. So they might be a starting place. And how can you even have labor if you don't have capital and land? So it seems like a critical starting place. But then I wonder if there's data to underscore our prioritization and laying these out in the kind of priorities that I've mentioned. If there's other surveys, other committee work that could help us with those priorities. And then last, just even during the session today, I started looking at some of that data in terms of the maps of where some of the groups that we're supposed to be addressing are, where the predominant states are that have Black farmers, the predominant states that have Latinx farmers. And actually there's 10 states that are predominantly with the Black farmers, and there's 8 states that are predominantly with the Latinx, and 2 of those states overlap. And that starts to lead me to a focus of resources and a focus of where we could have a bigger impact if we can focus on the states where these issues and people really need it the most. And I'm wondering if we need to organize in working groups along the priorities. And I'm so eager to get going with all of you to get to practical solutions.
Thank you. Co-Chair Rodriguez, would you like to say anything?
So I was just going to comment. I was very much impressed with what you're saying, Member Raji Fiddler. Is that correct? Did I mess it up? Okay, good. No, that would be excellent information to be able to see what you have come up with over the course of this meeting in regards to where the big concentrations are of Black, Hispanic farmers, and where the overlap is and so forth. Because obviously there's only so much money, there's so much time and resources, and the more we can, at least initially, figure out and determine where we want to focus at, the more effective and the more impactful we're going to be. So I would welcome seeing that. I'm sure the other members would too. in terms of what you came up with.
This is Poppy Hernandez. I just want to jump in because I want to add something on to Member Raji Fiddler's remarks also. I would be interested to see what kind of potential solution could apply to the how, what, and who. Meaning in that one bullet point that has, is this a legislative recommendation? Is this an executive recommendation? Is this, I think an administrative recommendation? I think having sort of like, what is the next path for this potential work could be super helpful in terms of who could bring gifts or talents to that work. Just wanted to interrupt and throw that in as a process. Thank you.
No, thank you, Member C.S. Hernandez. I think that makes perfect sense. And you know, another sort of response to the proposal about breaking and doing subgroups or just kind of focusing and I think that's going to be necessary so that we can all of the members can have a focus. Okay, moving forward, Member Cousin, and I'm going up through the list just for everyone's awareness.
Well, thank you very much for calling me, and thank you for the presentation regarding the Agricultural Subcommittee's work. Now, I think it's really important, and the reason I said it that way is because what we've just outlined are the priorities for the Agricultural Subcommittee. And what we're hearing from the commission members is concerns about how we prioritize that work of the committee, et cetera. I think there needs to be more clarity in the process between the work of the Agricultural Subcommittee and the Commission. There's a significant amount of interest from the members of the Commission in inputting into the work process as well as into the priority setting of the Agricultural Subcommittee, but it doesn't seem as if we have a clear process for engagement that would support that level of desired engagement by the Agricultural Subcommittee and the Commission. So that's one. Second, on that list that you've now asked us for what we think we should prioritize, and listening to both the comments that we've heard today from commission members, the information that has been written into the chats, as well as the public comments that we heard earlier, I think issues related to finance, access to capital, access to capacity have dominated much of the concerns that we have heard throughout today. And so prioritizing those issues would seem to be quite smart on our part, and as a suggestion that we're listening and hearing what is necessary. But I think when we talk about financing, without addressing the challenges of access and relationships at the local level for farmers, we are not going to get at the key root cause of the challenge that so many farmers have experienced at that local level. So it's not just enough to talk about new programs, new ideas, new ways of getting it out there if we don't deal with that engagement that farmers have at the local level and the challenges that they experience in that engagement. Now, the last point that I'd like to make is on this question that you're hearing about other issues, whether it's housing or the nutrition programs. And the co-chairs of the Deputy Secretary's statement regarding the need for additional subcommittees. I think what you're hearing is that need is now, not later. We need to impanel and propose responsibilities and issues for subcommittees now so that those working groups can begin, because there's a thirst for getting to those issues of whether we're talking housing or the nutrition programs, et cetera, as much as there is for the specific agricultural issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Cousin. Deputy Secretary Co-Chair Rodriguez, feel free to step in. Member Cousin, I do not have all of the answers for you. I will admit that. And one of the reasons why it's not as clear as you would like how the process is because we want to make sure that you as members of the subcommittee and committee have input on what you want that process to look like. We don't want to have two and then you all work, you figure out and come back at a later date. We want to work and establish a process with you so that we're sure that all members, Equity Commission subcommittees can find the opportunity to work on these matters. So at a very high level, I know that's not the answer you would like to hear, but we are thinking about that, but we also want your input.
And what may be beneficial, thank you, DFO Hernandez. Member Cousins, is for us to put together some suggested strategies for working together, and then we can finalize those at in between meetings or next meeting. Give you something to react to.
Yes.
And in terms of additional subcommittees, we hear and completely understand that. You said thirst. People are ready to move forward. I know you all are ready to move forward. So we already, have identified the Agricultural Committee, the Rural Development Committee, subcommittee, and if there are others, we just need to identify and focus and determine a step for how we're going to move forward in forming those. So we are not holding anybody back. We just need to land on some clarity about what additional subcommittees we can have some impact in, and then we can prepare a process for moving forward with those.
Thank you, Deputy Member Lower Bash, and then Member Redding.
Thank you very much. I'll second the request for including the nutrition programs in the conversation. It is, in terms of number of people impacted, it is the biggest thing that this department does. So as has been asked before, we are not the first to come to these questions. There's a whole series of reports that have come out before. I think not just what happened, but where there were obstacles, what were the obstacles? Was it culture? Was it that legislation was needed and Congress didn't want to do it? Was it we actually did the recommendation and it didn't have the impact that we thought it would? The more nuance we can get about what's already been tried, the more likely we are to be able to actually have effective recommendations going forward, which I know everyone on the committee really wants to do. I won't take more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lower Bash. Yes, that is definitely something that we are that we heard today throughout. So we'll make sure that we provide a list of recommendations by other USDA committees. Member Redding, and then Member Hung.
Again, thank you. Just an observation, looking at the list of 11 goals and reflecting on the day's conversations, knowing that each one of these, I think, is on a parallel track, right? Because you have sort of administration priorities. There are, public comments that have been made, and some of these are embedded in some legal action. So as I look at it, each one sort of has a track, but they're parallel to each other, with no sort of single jurisdiction by this subcommittee or even the commission. So that helps to sort of think through that. I think the question here is, where do we place sort of our energies on looking at these goals? I would suggest looking at a couple of things. One, number 8 just looks at the supporting functions, and I would modify that slightly to include the state committees in addition to county committees, just to be sure. Obviously, with the sensitivity to debt relief and coming out of states, there's obviously a lot of state views here that probably need to be delved into and considered as part of that sort of those functions. And then 2 other things that I would suggest adding. One would be, we talked about data today, and I think there are some really important data gaps, and whether that is something that this subcommittee could help identify what data is missing, where are the gaps, potentially who holds that data to help make informed decisions going forward. And then final would be the need to really look forward. I heard that from the Secretary and Deputy Secretary Brunel. Really looking forward is I would appreciate some consideration of how do we address the new generation of farmers that are in the urban centers, are in places and enterprises that they're not in the traditional system, is my point, nor is the system necessarily accommodating to them or ignoring them. But how do you foster that and develop that? So maybe something in the goals of looking at the new or next generation
of farmers to include cultivation of youth as part of that. So thank you.
Member Redding, just want to make a comment about something you mentioned, and that's the data gaps piece. That's really important. You know, data, we have it, you know, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. We have data, but then there are places that we're missing some data that maybe we recognize, and in some cases we don't recognize. So we can really use the help of the committees in identifying for us where there are gaps, where you're not seeing enough data and information that we can make decisions. So I really am glad that you raised that point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hong, and then Member Rawls.
Thank you, Cecilia. First and foremost, thank you so much. It's been truly enlightening to hear everybody's comments here. And also, you know, just to the establishment of the Equity Committee here. You know, so I'm really grateful for that, to participate in this committee here as a subcommittee member. You know, and maybe this may be a little redundant here, as I know that I hear many of my colleagues have mentioned this as well too. And I'm very thankful for this goal and this list here. I know that there is definitely a lot for us to work on towards, but maybe just a comment here, you know, that the Equity Commission Committee was created to address the systemic racism that exists. And I'm thinking that just looking at these goals here, one of my thoughts would be, you know, while everything has its consequences and need to be addressed here, my first inclination was to focus on more of the culture within USDA. And I think that this has been addressed on a number of levels as well too, as Member Redding had mentioned, that including states into the supporting committees. But I think that not only there needs to be a clear line of communications, not just from a top down, but also from the bottom up. Working with a number of farmers here in Minnesota, we brought our concerns to local, you know, field offices. And there's always been this kind of gap where it's like, oh, we can only take it so far. And then you take it to the state and the same thing, same process here. So I think it's about changing the culture of USDA and the communications levels, so that it is being heard not only from top down, but also from the bottom up as well too, because that really address the issues, concerns that your constituents may have as well. But at the same time, you know, I like the idea of, okay, how do you improve technical assistance, capital, access to programs? You know, definitely, you know, those are definitely concerns that we need to address right away. And maybe we could do this simultaneously as well too, while we change the culture within USDA, that we address this. Otherwise, if we just avoid addressing the culture of USDA, then I feel like we're just slapping a Band-Aid on top of, oh, well, here's a handout here. You know, we're going to address the issue of programs, here's some fundings and whatnot here. But that doesn't really change the culture, and what we're trying to get to is, you know, address the systemic racism here. And to address systemic racism, we need to have system change as well too. So just my 2 sentences.
Thank you, Member Hong.
And Member Hong, just a quick comment. You know, we have started a lot of really, really important work in looking at the culture here at USDA. That's a big part of our strategic plan. So your comment about culture could not be more timely. I think it's really important. So I appeal to this committee, the committees again, to assist us in really trying to dig deeper into our culture so we can have some, you know, changes that are going to remain forever in terms of the culture that we know in many cases needs to be changed.
Thank you, Deputy. Member Rawls?
So I would come at it like this. I think these issues, culture, access to programs, and technical assistance to take advantage of programs, are incredibly important and need to be a super priority. But I would also want to get back to kind of this issue that I have been knocking around in my head about structural program design. Because at the end of the day, if you have great culture and the USDA staff is wonderfully welcoming and inclusive, and all farmers have access and technical assistance is being provided. But at the end of the day, if you submit your application and the answer is, well, actually we pay on historic bushels per acre, Mr. Jones, and so you're due $7, or you're due, you know, some minimal amount, and thank you very much. Well, that's not very helpful. So I do think the subcommittee needs to look at this program structure question, and just to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. I know I'm in the weeds for some of the folks on here, but traditionally these farm programs have paid on historic production and that kind of thing. And the small farmer, minority farmer, typically, I don't want to generalize too much, but let's just, you know, limited resources farmers, you know, that kind of program structure is not that helpful to them in my mind. And so looking way down the road, I wonder if we ought to be thinking about some kind of a new kind of EIS. And I don't know if you could call it this, but equity impact assessment, equity impact statement, so that you look at program design about how this is going to work and who it's really going to help, and that there's some compensations are made. Maybe there's a base payment. Again, I know I'm in the weeds for some people, but bear me out for just a second. So let's say an administration comes along and starts a trade disagreement with China, and it results in harming farmers. And so the Department of Agriculture says, oh, we're going to roll out a few $1 billion in trade adjustment assistance. But it's paid on acres, it's paid on production. And so it really only helps, again, large landowners and large operators. So maybe there ought to be a base payment for all farmers of a certain amount. And people say, well, you can't do that. Well, we did that in 1996. We had something called the Agricultural Market Transition Assistance Payment Program, and farmers were provided a base payment. And now the theory behind that was we were going to phase out the farm programs, which never happened. But anyway, I've probably gone down this rabbit hole too far, again, certainly for some people. But the concept is trying to, in a forward-looking way, as significant resources are put into the farm programs, are they being designed in a way to reach everybody? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Rawls. All very good information. I may probably follow up with you to just make sure I got everything you you provided, and make sure that the commission subcommittee have all of that as well, so that they can react and continue to add to that. With that, I'm going to go to Member Stevens.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks. And some of what I will say has probably already been said by everyone, because I jotted my notes down so I wouldn't forget. My first thought was, how do we eat this elephant? Do we establish task groups, which is what some of the other members said prior to me. Then my recommendation would be to review the suggestions or reports of former committees on some of the topics that are included in the goals. And then the last one I want to say is, data is good, but often the voices of the historically underserved landowners are not included in the research, or the researchers didn't look like them. So their perspective isn't always included in the data. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you, Member Stevens, and I like how you phrased that. So we'll make sure there's a lot of homework on our end at USDA, but I think that your proposed strategy sounds like one potential path. Now, I want to make sure there are still a few questions. There's still many members with their hands up. Member Stanger McCullen, and I apologize if I am not pronouncing some of the members' names correct. I will get better, I promise.
You're fine. It's McLaughlin, Stanger McLaughlin. But I just wanted to echo on some of the suggestions for additional committees, but I also wanted to, from personal experience, to share the significance of even just one person and the contributions they can make in this space. I would caution us from waiting for a committee to be established to research some of these areas. And if you have current staff that could be assigned to even each mission area agency and office within the department to create a grid or some type of form that will identify current issues through the work done by previous committees or through reports. If that is an administrative fix or a congressional fix, timelines, budget requests, and create that now. I know that this has been successful in the past because when we were creating the Native Farm Bill Coalition, we had one person assigned to research requests and needs for Native Americans that they would request in the next Farm Bill. And through just one person researching that and making that their day-to-day job, that we got nearly everything we wanted in the most recent Farm Bill. And so I encourage us to move forward with staff in researching this area immediately as we look at forming new subcommittees.
Thank you. Member Horn. Okay, let me go to Member Vogel, and then we can go back to Member Horn.
I think another area where USDA could be a convener is in the area of influencing state departments of agriculture. I spent 8 years as a commissioner of agriculture, and I don't recall any particular initiatives during that time, that was quite a while ago, that had to do with minority farmers or uplifting small farmers. So it was a pretty tough crowd. But I think that USDA is in a position to have a great influence over NASDA and other committees and organizations of, say, state veterinarians and so on. So many of those programs at the state level, for example, just don't reach the populations that this committee is concerned about. For example, and there's so many decades of neglect that there needs to be catch-up work or education even. So I would encourage USDA to be thinking about its role as a leader of a bully pulpit in terms of showing leadership in how this kind of equity initiative can be accomplished on state and local levels. Thank you.
Member Vogel, just a comment in seeing your history as the first woman commissioner, state commissioner, and of course, Secretary Redding is on the call. I've also served in that capacity, and can't say more about engagement with NASDA, which is huge, but that connection to the state and local level, because that's where people really see the changes. They see them at the local level and a lot of times at the state level. So there's a lot to do in terms of that coordination. So excellent point that you raised.
Oh, Deputy Secretary Bernard, I spent 8 years as the only woman at NASDA.
Broke down a lot of doors, yeah. Thank you.
It looks like we still have your hands raised for Member Smith, Rawls, and Horn. So if anyone.
This is Rick Smith. You mentioned you were going to, I think, try and provide us with, I forget the delineation, but 10 states where maybe Black farmers maybe are more significant, and 8 other states, and 2 of. Would it also be possible to, when we talk about farmers, what types of farming are we talking about? crops and what are the significant crops or livestock? What type of livestock or poultry, or is there any way to provide that type of data too?
Yes, we can do a breakup of yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Member Rawls, did you want to say something else, or was that from your previous comment?
Yeah, I think that was just my previous comments. Thank you very much, Cecilia. Although one unconnected thing, but I did make a note when Commissioner Vogel was talking. She was talking about the importance of the Secretary of Agriculture interacting with the Department of Justice, and that really hit home with me, because I will tell you that the first Pigford settlement would not have been made. Well, we may have eventually gotten there, but one of the reasons it got done at the time that it did was that Secretary Glickman called Attorney General Reno and said, we think there was inequities here, and we need to try to settle this case, and your lawyers are litigating this in a way that's not helpful. And so that set the stage then for her to talk to her people, and that got them in a much better place to help resolve the case. And of course, none of that was fun. I can tell you that the line attorneys were mad as hell with me at the time, and but we got through it, and it was very important. So, great point.
Thank you, Member Rawls. We'll be sure to capture in our notes and send it back to the members, including you. Okay, well, it is, we are getting close to ending our meeting. We've been here for a few hours. So with that, I do want to close it out with just closing remarks from all of you, members of the commission, members of the subcommittee, co-chairs. Please chime in and provide your closing thoughts and on your reflections for the day of what you would like your impact to be, your vision for impact for the work that lies ahead.
So DFO Hernandez, would you like to open up and let the committee talk about vision and impact, and then perhaps co-chairs, we can make the final comments.
Perfect. We can certainly do that. Any final thoughts from members of the commission or subcommittee? Member Cousin.
Well, first of all, let me start by thanking you, DFO Cecilia Hernandez, for all the hard work that you've put in organizing today's meeting, and for all the hard work, as you see, that you're going to need to perform to get everything done that this commission envisioned. So thank you very, very much. I also want to thank our co-chairs for their guidance and their leadership in not only in this meeting today, but in the planning for this meeting, the lead up. The Secretary of Vilsack is well served by you, as I hope he will be well served by us as members of this commission. As far as my reflection on today's meeting, we're challenged by the format that we're in today. For a first commission meeting of this importance, for us to be limited by a virtual setting based on the times that we're in today is something that we couldn't avoid, but we need to recognize that as soon as possible, we need to find ways for this commission to meet in person. For us to not only meet in person, but for us to, as you heard commission members say today, to get out into the field and hear from the people that we're representing and those who are expecting so much from us as a part of this commission. And so I am committed to wearing my mask and being out there and being with all of you in the future. And I hope that other commission members will embrace the opportunity for us to come together, because what we've learned is that while we can efficiently operate a meeting through a virtual setting, we cannot truly engage in the depth of conversation and the reflections that are necessary to drive the change that we need from this commission. Then the final thing I'll say is, what would I like to see out of this commission? If we can develop a set of recommendations, and not just recommendations, but actions that the department can take that live longer than one administration, that provide the level of change that so many of the previous commission's reports and recommendations have not yet been able to achieve. That's the vision I'd like to see for how we define success. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Cousin. It's my honor to be here. And I know a lot of work lies ahead, but I think we have a good team. So I'm very happy to work with all of you. Member Rainey.
Good afternoon. I love the conversation. Just a couple of observations. First is given the time that we are in, I've been monitoring the chat as well, and I think we need to be very transparent of how we're going to collect and use that information to be respectful, to let people that are on, that are the public, and I appreciate them for being here, all the people from public that are making their comments, that we are considering and hearing their thoughts, because the word that I keep hearing is trust. And that starts with relationships, and we got to start rebuilding some of those relationships. And unfortunately, we have some groups within our communities that have been underserved that have turned away from USD, and they no longer seek access. The thing that stood out to me as I heard Dr. Goldman's details of the data is that those data were representing limited or limited access. And that not only limited the growth potential for businesses, it drove some businesses out of business. But those businesses impact families and impact communities. We talked a little bit about housing. So I think it's important that we recognize some of the wealth disparities that we see today, how a lot of those are intricately linked as far as the cumulative impact on specific regions of the country, especially rural America that has heavy populations of marginalized community members. And so I just hope we keep spite of that fact, and that we really be transparent and intentional as we have our conversations so that people can feel like this is a transparent process.
Thank you, Member Rainey. Member Lomeli Corcoran.
And to add to Member Rainey, I completely agreed. I just wanted to add that as we look at these programs, grants, and procurement policies directing USDA funding to farms and ranchers, that again, that we don't forget that they also have a tremendous impact on farm workers working on those farms. And I just want to, continue to add all the amazing expertise on farmers and ranchers, and I'm learning a lot, but just, the tremendous impact that, farm workers also have, in particularly when those funds empower employers with a history of worker abuse. So definitely appreciate everything that DFO Hernandez and co-chairs have done for today. Looking forward to meeting all of you in person, and thank you again.
Thank you. Member Eubanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you both for the co-chairs that are here with us today. My whole thing is lifting up the farmer, making sure that the farmer is valued for what he brings to the table. One of the things is the local level. We as a commission and ag subcommittee can do a lot, but it's where the rubber meets the road with the farm workers and the farmers, and saying to them that they come to the table and they are valued with what they bring. I come from an extension background, and I know if it's going to sustain itself, we got to ensure the local input. Then we can walk away. We're going to not walk away from this, but at the local level, when I see the benefit, I lift it up as well. So it's important for us to allow the farmers to be able to see that. And I go back to my age-old thing, the trust, the transparency, and the transformation of all that we do is going to be a key factor. Thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Any final thoughts from the members before I go to the co-chairs?
Hi, this is Tony Stanger McLaughlin again. And one thing that I wanted to say about my entity, we were birthed from the class action lawsuit Keep Siegel v. Vilsack. And the majority of the work we do is in the credit space, access to credit, credit servicing, but also reducing the issues that cause the initial harm of our claimants. we are going to continue to march forth in that effort, both in the private and public sphere. And we're doing so also in alliance with the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. And I know that that entity, like many other entities, are established to serve underserved communities, and we need to hear from their voices as well. And also we can learn and speed up this process by implementing the requests that they've already made.
Thank you. Member Horn?
Yes, I'm afraid that I've been working and dealing with a family medical crisis, so I'm sort of not showing up this minute in my best self, but I just want to, I've been listening, and I just want to thank everyone for their contribution. And Cecilia, I think you're an amazing DFO. I've done FACA before, but it just like your depth of caring and making sure that the agenda is reflective of where we need to go and that it's real, that people to help the agency to rebuild trust. I think one of the things that I would recommend on the civil rights side is for there to be data gathering around states that have fallen off in terms of filing complaints and meeting with state directors and the other federal agencies in the state to really do an outreach to communities, leave their offices and really get into BIPOC communities to gather get information from public meetings. And I think that would be critical as part of the first step in data gathering and rebuilding trust. I think the trust piece, the lack of it is huge and might itself present the greatest barrier to transformation. Because if your customers are lacking in faith in your processes, the best laid out plan is not going to get us there. And so we have to really work at that as a committee and as the agency. So thank you. And I know that you are the best message carrier, so I have a lot of faith in your ability to convey that message, Ms. Hernandez. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Horn. I really appreciate your kind words. Member Lee, I know you were having issues before. Hopefully we got those resolved. I think you're on mute, ma'am.
Issues here. I want to echo everything that's been said by my fellow members. I want to thank Cecilia and our co-chairs for really directing this really rich dialogue. Instead of this a call to action for all of us, the deadline was a little overwhelming when I saw it, but hearing everybody and knowing that in between now and the next meeting, all of us contribute. And Cecilia, you will be getting a lot of emails from me. And I want to thank all the participants and the leadership of USDA. Lots to do, but lots of energies here. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lee, and that's what I'm here for. So you send as much information as you need, and I will make sure that the members receive all of that information. Member C.S. Hernandez.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Appreciate being a part of this really important work. I think during our orientation, it was your words, DFO Hernandez, that you were hoping the commission was going to keep it real during this open meeting. And I do think that we have. And I guess I just felt like I needed to say out loud that, you know, the work of this commission is to behold the pain of our history while looking forward. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, but also to own the fact that we won't be able to do all the things. And I feel like in my own work of leading equity and inclusion in our state, I've had to be really intentional about what I'm saying yes to and what I'm saying no to. And so what I heard from seeing the chat and hearing from the fellow commissioners and committee members and the co-chairs and Dr. Goldman, who I really appreciated your remarks, is that the challenge before us is to really look for systemic change opportunities and to really honor the work that has come before us and to use the data that has been already collected versus spending a bunch of time contemplating and collecting more data. We really have to honor the work that has happened before us. And so I just kind of wanted to say those things out loud. I just, when I'm listening to a lot of the conversation about civil rights violations, it's something that we have spent a lot of time talking about in our state, thinking about complaints, discriminatory complaints. And so the caveat that I'll add here is that while we may not be able to get movement on legal cases or chime in on complaint hearing, things like that, those legal issues, we can use them as a source of data. We can look at where the patterns are around these issues, and we can build out systemic change from that as a data set. So I just kind of wanted to say that there are lots of other opportunities, but I'm really thinking about what can we say yes to here, and super excited about doing the work ahead.
Thank you, Member Cias-Hernandez. All good points to consider. And it looks like we have one more member, Member Corley.
So I will try to be deep, but I'll say one thing coherently, and that is to thank you all for your time and making this a really meaningful event for me. What I would say, though, that maybe a little bit unfiltered is, I would just encourage us to think about how we can not only work with each other and making structural changes, but as somebody who sits in the private sector, thinking about what those partnerships can look like across the aisle, because I think that we can bring some of that work commitment and unique ways to resolve some of these issues, because I think it needs to be done yesterday. And oftentimes when you make change, the change that sticks, the change that is tied to something that can be stress test, it doesn't really require somebody to be a champion for these issues to be resolved, because we need to make sure that we're going to be in place for years to come and make these things come together in its fullness.
Thank you, Member Corley. And with that, I will give the floor to the co-chairs for their final remarks.
Yeah, thank you, DFO Hernandez. And I'll start, and then I know that my co-chair has a couple of points to make. I just, echo you all in thanking DFO Hernandez. She has done an incredible job, hands down. But I also have to say that she's had a lot of good support from a lot of folks here at USDA who are full on and committed to ensuring that the work that we do goes forward. It goes forward the right way, that we provide you the support that you need. So we have had a lot of hands in the work to stand up the Equity Commission in the Subcommittee on Agriculture. Appreciate Dr. Goldman for his rich perspective that he brought to us today. And I'm going to thank you all because we're now officially partners. I'm going to say we're family. Because we have to join together and we have to move forward. And just thinking about some of the next steps, we talked a lot about data. We talked about reports. That is so important, but not just the reports, but what's the status of recommendations that have been made historically and in the past? What type of fix might be necessary for those? What are the gaps? What are the obstacles that we face? We were going to be giving thought to getting all of that necessary information to you as soon as we can, so it can begin to just get you all thinking and moving forward. Member Sherrod didn't speak up very much today, and we all know what a wise person she is and all the experience that she has, but she hit on a really good point. Where do we go to engage with people? And Member Stevens, I think you said the voices are another piece that we need to include in our research and our data. So we need to think about the communities where we need to come together physically in a community where we have opportunities to engage with the community, to host these meetings, to show people that We're committed because we are hearing from people where they live. And I think that's going to be very important as we think about our next meeting. So we're going to work as much as we can to ensure that we can have some face-to-face meetings in communities. And then we've given a lot of thought to our work, how we kind of take this work on. There's a lot of good work to do, and we're going to have to prioritize and strategize. And I love the suggestion, co-chair, that you asked from member Raji Fiddler, who gave us some suggestions, and many of you gave good suggestions. So those are just a couple of things. And I know member Rodriguez, co-chair Rodriguez has some others. But I would just like to say, you know, in this role that I took on as deputy secretary, I knew the gravity. I knew what this was going to mean, and I knew the work that had to be done. And, you know, I think about when I took on this role and I thought about it, having conversations with the secretary and even an opportunity to speak briefly with President Biden to ask them about their sincerity about doing this work that USDA needs to do to address equity and all the historic racism and discrimination that so many have faced in the past. And I needed for them to tell me that they were serious about this work, that we really were going to do something. Because as you all said, there is a lack of trust that USDA will ever change. There's some people that don't think we will ever change. President Biden committed, Secretary Vilsack committed, and therefore I am committed. We have to make a difference. And so I just thank you all for coming along with us on this journey, because this is a journey, one of the most important we will ever take at USDA. So we're now all bonded together, and you will hold us responsible at USDA for making sure this gets done well and it helps people, because that's what this is all about. So I just want to say thank you for your commitment. We're committed to you, and I just look forward to all of the great and really important work that we're going to do. So I'll stop there, and I will turn it over to my co-chair, Co-Chair Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary. And I echo everything that Deputy Secretary just said in regards to what we've done, what we've achieved over the past 5 hours now. And I tell you, besides Secretary Vilsack and the commitment of the Deputy Secretary, I mean, I'm just thrilled with the commitment that all of you have, because everybody was here today, from the commission, all the folks that are serving, all the folks on the Ag Subcommittee. Everybody stayed here for 5 hours, pretty amazing. And to be on video as opposed to being there in person. So it just says a tremendous amount, I think, of the commitment that we all have and the trust we're building with one another. And I know in my particular case, it's very exciting to be here, not only as co-chair, but just to be a member with all of you, because of the fact that I spent 50 years of my life in agriculture, and particularly with farm workers. And we have never been invited to a commission like this to discuss how the farm workers have been excluded, how minorities have been excluded, and when it comes to agriculture, and particularly with USDA. So it's, for us, it's very exciting to be able to be here, to share with you, to learn from you, and to be able to figure out and determine, okay, how do we correct some of the wrongs, and how do we look to creating a new path and a new future, and ensuring that whatever we did in the past is going to change for the future. And I know we're here with a lot of great people that have done great things throughout the years. And I look forward to working with each and every one of you so that we can continue that and make sure that, I think at the end of this 2-year period, that we all feel like, okay, we sweated, we put a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of resources into this, and we achieved something, and we made a difference, and looking forward to doing it with each and every one of you. Thank you very much.
And Co-Chair Arturo, I just want to say thank you. I'm honored that you're serving as co-chair. And our co-chair thought it was so important. He wanted to physically be here so that we could sit beside each other in terms of our leadership. And so he came here from his home state to be here with us in Washington, D.C. So I appreciate that, and thank you. We are committed to leading this group.
Likewise. We look forward to being together with everybody the next time.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, co-chairs. I think you wrapped it up pretty well. At this point, I just want to do a few reminder, high-level next steps, and then we will adjourn. So again, written comments can be still provided until March 15th. At this point, please provide those to the Equity Commission at USDA.gov email, and then we will ensure that these are put in the public record. After that, we will put meeting minutes, documents, the slides that you saw today, the comments, all on our website, and so that will be there. One last thing is, at this point, we are a tentative, and I don't want to overpromise, but tentative for our next public meeting in May. And so unfortunately, we don't have those dates yet. We will work with the members to do a poll to figure out what days work for all of them, and just be assured that we will definitely provide a Federal Register notice out for this public meeting 15 days beforehand. And like the Deputy Secretary stated, we do want to at some point, hopefully the next one, have it in person. That does not mean that the public won't be able to attend. Moving forward, the public will be invited, and it will be sort of a hybrid in-person Zoom. And so all of those logistics will have to work them, but the public will be again invited to attend and participate in this in this meeting. And so just I want to thank you for this important and necessary work with the members of the committee and subcommittee. You will be hearing from me with a summary and a lot of work ahead and next steps, and we to get ourselves develop a work plan and organize to start doing some of this work. And I also want to thank the public for your participation. And so I do look forward to working with all of you throughout this process. With that, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.